And we're live. So there we go. Boom.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. That was nice and quick. I'm used to the songs.
Yeah, I know. I have no intro. It's just awkward. Like
No,
at
it's
the beginning,
better.
it's awkward every time.
We
gotta
get
make
we get
one.
straight to business. I like it.
Yeah, I do too.
So I thought we could talk about the jurors interview because I found that very interesting, and also just like a little bit about professional jurors, just because I saw Sleuthie, you had asked in Twitter about that, and so I just found that a little bit interesting. Um,
Oh,
which
Fish, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
sure, yeah,
Are you on a desktop?
I'm on a laptop, yeah.
Do you have a way to add permissions to where people can add their streams over to you? Because you may need to do that.
Maybe
Teresa
I
wants
don't
to
know how
bounce
to
her
do that.
stream over to you.
Do I go to like guests or something?
I don't remember. It's in the studio. Sorry, guys.
I think I
allow.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's like an enable for it. If you don't have it enabled, it won't let anybody do it.
I think it is enabled, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I mean she could just try doing it, right?
Yeah. If not, I'll go over there and put a link in there. Don't pay attention to me, I'll be out for a second.
Okay, I think it's enabled as far as I know it is.
I forgot what they call that, like dual streaming. I forgot what they call it.
Yeah.
It's
teleport or something.
Yeah.
No, not teleport. It's not teleport. What is it?
I mean, basically. Yeah, I don't know.
To allow like two people on panel to stream to each of their channels. Is that what he's talking about?
There's a way at the end of the stream when you end it, it'll put a link up and detour you over to another stream if you want to click it, or like
yeah,
it
so they
pops up
have to watch whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that different from like what they call a raid?
Yeah, it's a stream. That's what it is.
Oh, it's under redirect on Studio, not StreamYard. You go to Studio, and then it says there's like an option to allow people to redirect to you.
There you go.
Do I have to leave the studio to do it?
No. Are you You're streaming from StreamYard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am.
So you have to go to YouTube Studio.
Oh, yep. YouTube. Oh, okay.
Just search in your Google browser. Just hit Studio. So sorry, chat.
The audience totally doesn't mind us doing this right now.
I mean,
I'm sure.
Sorry.
Sorry. It took me like 3 live streams to explain to Andrea how to do it because she tried multiple times and Teresa could never get it sent over there. I think it like auto blocks.
Yeah, I think you have to enable it if we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I enabled mine and it would never let it work. I don't know why.
I think that Andrea had to like physically type in or put the link to his actual channel.
Okay.
Yep, it's a pain in the butt. It's not as easy as they make it out to be. But it's worth it to do it with people that you stream at similar times with and your buddies with.
And you might have to have like the paid version or be monetized. I'm not sure.
She's in the monetized boat.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. Just give me a minute and I will get this done, hopefully quickly.
No, you're good.
I mean, you don't have to do it.
No, you're good. But while she works on that, Sleuthie, Goosey, I don't know if we've ever been on the same panel at the same time.
Never.
Oh, okay. I didn't think so. And so, like, where do I see you most often? Is it Defense Diaries or Sleuth Into? I'm just trying to figure out where I've seen you.
I think everywhere. I think when I first listened to you, I think it was on Greeno's channel.
Sure.
And then were you on Dan's?
He's been on here.
I know he's been here because I
think he was on Greeno with Charles and Greeno and I one night.
It might have
you
been.
might have been there that night.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, maybe Fishy did talk me into going on dance. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah. So where are you a moderator at? What channels, if you don't mind me asking?
Everywhere.
Because I can't.
No, well, I'm a moderator on Teresa's. I think I have like a wrench. Just recently Bob's. Um,
Defense Diaries.
yes,
I thought so. And when you
yeah,
say increases criminality,
yes.
okay,
Okay, so I thought you guys would get along well, and you guys would be like a good match because you guys are both smart and like I know Sterling, last time you were discussing like how you felt that like the jury process is kind of like flawed in that like the discussion of like when
yes.
they go back for deliberations. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, what I was saying was, I guarantee you, not all. Well, how many jurors is it? 12. I guarantee you, not all 12 jurors went back there thinking that he was guilty. I guarantee you, it was at least one, or I can't remember exactly what I said, but a few. And
Uh-huh.
I said that back there in this closed room, and then they deliberate, which somehow means like convince the other person to come to your side.
Hmm.
Which I don't know. Like, they've already been influenced by professionals for over the course of what, 4 weeks. They've
Hmm.
heard both sides, and the judge determined what they should hear and what they shouldn't. And then that's not enough. Then they got to go back there and face this socially awkward situation and debate it with each other. It's just weird. I think they should go. They've already heard everything. They should just go back there and vote straight away, and that's that.
Yeah. Well, and once they get back there, the emotion part of it that's not present when they're sitting in the courtroom listening to the evidence is now there. So you're talking about a situation, let's say with these particular jurors where they're sequestered, you have people that want to go home to their families. I'm sure it was brought up at certain times about how they want to go home. They miss their kid. They miss their families. Um, I think it adds another layer of, if I don't push towards agreeing with the majority, then I'm making these people suffer by keeping them here.
Absolutely. And I'm making myself suffer, and it's nuanced because there's more to it than that. I feel like as like a social species, we kind of like want to avoid conflict. We kind of want to work together, but that doesn't mean like. And so sometimes people will just agree with the scary person or the majority just to get along and go along. And I just don't think that's how it should be. They came in there with the idea. How does some nine other Joe Schmoes convince them that they're wrong? It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know
So
the solution. I don't know if they should just go back and like, it's like, okay, you've heard all the evidence from the professionals who can argue it to you. So before your brain starts mixing up what you actually heard versus what you think you heard and what others try to tell you they heard, do you just go back and you make a vote? And if everybody's not guilty, or if there's not all 12 guilty votes, then that's it. You didn't meet your burden.
bingo,
Yeah,
bingo.
I don't know.
Well, and it sounds like that like is kind of what happened is the juror said that when they first took the vote, there was three of them who were undecided or like not guilty, and
Yeah.
then after they like did some deliberations and stuff like that, then they went and they vote, or after they watched the videos, I believe is what she said, that they went and voted again, and then there was like four that were undecided. So like
Yeah.
it just goes to show that like I mean something was going on in there.
And I never made it. I didn't listen to the whole interview, and I never made it to the part where what convinced those four to join the other nine. I,
I don't think she said it was very sudden. It seemed that, if I have the timeline of this correct, from what I understand, they went in that day. They asked to view the two interrogations and the bridge guy video, maybe like the original and the enhanced, and then an additional person, like you just said, went to undecided from guilty. So now you have four undecided and eight guilty. You go home, quote home, um, and you were told by the foreman for the undecideds to go back to the hotel and consider, what all their questions were, what things were holding them up. They go back in on Monday and they split up into groups, And what it sounds like to me is they essentially split into 4 groups of 3, each one likely having a undecided person, and then the other 3 people that were, or the other 2 people that were in that little group, the subgroup, would I guess try to convince them of guilty, and then the next time they took a vote, everybody was guilty.
And you know what's interesting is that they're making the undecided explain themselves. How come the
Yeah,
people that are already decided, who have drawn conclusions and made claims about someone's guilt or innocence, they should be the ones to have to explain themselves?
right. And I think that I think that it's easier to stand your ground with a group of 3 other people who agree with you that they're undecided than it is to separate you and you be the only one.
Well,
Absolutely.
I thought it was interesting that they separated them anyways, because they had said that they weren't allowed to discuss the case, like, unless all of them were there, right? I know
Yeah.
that was like before that they went back for deliberations, but it seems like they would want something similar to that, like, in when they're actually talking about the case, you know?
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I think I'd enabled it, but maybe not. But I tried.
But then, like, so I was looking at like better, just somehow we can improve it, and I was offering that just as a possible improvement. And I do believe that it would be. I do believe it would result in more people, like more hung juries, so and so forth and so on. Like, and so when I heard this idea of a professional jury, I was interested. Thank you.
I have to say, every time I hear that Sterling's been somewhere, you know this, after I realized that you had been live with him before, I was so bummed that I missed it, because I appreciate it, even little things like that. Like, thank you. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I
No,
was
no,
also
thank you. Thank you. I never thought of it. I never thought of it before, so I'm thanking you because I never thought of a professional jury. It's interesting. Thank you.
Well, I I have to say, like, while I do think that I think that professional juries have potential flaws. Again, I don't know what a solution could possibly be. Uh, but I'm also the same type of person who doesn't think that it's appropriate or fair for, if you get a mistrial, I don't think that it's right to be able to be tried over and over again until you get a guilty verdict. I mean,
Yeah.
you've brought it, you didn't meet your burden, that should be the end of it. I don't think that you should be able to go trial 3, trial 4 over and over again until you get the answer you want.
I might agree.
Well, because there's
I'm,
obviously doubt. If they're not finding you guilty, then there's that many people that don't think you're guilty. I don't know.
And how many times does it have to happen for you to then be like, well, maybe the doubts that they have are reasonable? If,
Yeah.
3 sets of 12 all found something that they felt was reasonable, then why am I don't know, it just seems like a colossal waste of money. And it seems like they can just keep trying you until they get the answer that they want. And I don't think that going to trial is just to get a guilty verdict, but maybe it is.
Hmm.
right, and I guess double jeopardy only comes into play if you were acquitted or found not guilty. You can't retry them.
Exactly.
But maybe double jeopardy should include hung juries and mistrials. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you think about it that way, I mean, that would be an improvement in my opinion. But at the same time, it's like, if you have a trial where you are, so for instance, I'm of the opinion with this particular case that it made much more sense when Nick had charged him with felony murder. I don't understand having added the 2 counts of regular murder. Um, and then having him convicted on all of them, which this might be interesting. I guess I wasn't thinking about it, but he was convicted of both murder and felony murder, 2 counts of each, right?
Hmm.
So you would think, if there's a trial number 2, well, he was already convicted of felony murder and murder. So what do they charge him with? But because they dropped the felony murder and only charged him with murder, he could be then again charged with felony murder. And so I'm wondering, if there were another trial, if that's what he would go for the second time.
Did they dismiss those? Did she dismiss those as prejudice or no?
She she just I don't know if vacate
dismissed.
is the right word.
Probably. Yeah,
Okay, so
that whole thing,
profession.
the retrial thing's weird.
Yeah, like
I think so.
do you guys want to talk about jurors further, or do you guys want to talk about like this stuff that just came out or whatever?
Well, just for the professional jurors thing, while I crave some type of change, I don't know that professional jurors is the way to go, because at that point, then you're talking, you have, a group of, let's say, 16 people in whatever jurisdiction who is being paid by the state.
Mm-hmm.
That's like their job. And so
Oh,
I don't think that
Sleuthie.
would be appropriate. What?
I was gonna say, like, without getting into professional jurors, maybe our curriculum in our schools should actually teach people about their rights and teach them how juries work. My high school, we went to Columbus and
We did too.
got to watch, like, we got to watch a grand jury thing and all that good stuff. But I feel like a lot of people don't get to do that, and they have no idea what's going on. Maybe they need to incorporate that into the mandatory government classes you take to graduate.
Yeah, we had electives too. Like I took a law, it was like a law something or other class when I was in high school. We had different things that we could take that way. Um, but civics too, we went in and we actually sat in on a trial. It wasn't like a murder trial, but it was a trial at the local courthouse. So we did that too. But in terms of your rights and stuff, I do think they should be teaching that to people just in general. It seems very limited
Yeah.
number of people have knowledge about it.
What to do when you get pulled over, what to do, how your Fifth Amendment works, all the above. That way people don't watch TV and think that's how things work.
Well, even something as simple as like a cop knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Most people don't know you don't have to answer. You don't have to open the door and answer.
Mm-hmm.
Or them
Make
coming
sure
up and
people know
covering up your ring cam. Like they're
Oh,
not
yeah.
supposed to do that. Like that's
Yeah.
not okay.
Pennsylvania v. Mims, make sure people know about that, all that stuff. I didn't mean to digress into that, but
Okay, so,
it's something that bothers me.
so like no country has fully implemented professional jurors, but there are like a few countries that have like had kind of a mix of professional judges with lay participants, which basically they have deliberations alongside professional judges for certain criminal cases. Like so they'll have like you know 3 judges and then like some lay people, and then they'll all discuss the case so that like they can inform them on like the legal standards of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure I'm not explaining that very well, but
Yeah, but I like the emotional stuff sticks with me. I just think that when you are putting just regular, not that I feel like hardened, desensitized people should be jurors, but when you're talking about the law, like you shouldn't be talking about feelings. And then we put 12 normal ass people, grandparents and parents and brothers and sisters who have like a lot of emotions and don't see like pictures of deceased children. And then like you're showing these regular ass people these horrendous images, and this person that's sitting there who essentially the state, it's normal to have that click in your head as like, okay, well, like we wouldn't really be here if they didn't really think this person did it. And I think it's very difficult to detach from your emotions, and I don't think that that's the way we should convict people, if that makes sense. And I think I don't know that like a class would help that, but I don't know what would. I'm kind of unhelpful that way.
yeah, no, I definitely agree that like there's definite limitations to the way our system works now that could like I mean, I'm sure we could improve it in some way.
You're right, because I guess one of the problems is that I guess you're entitled to a jury of your peers, and then the question becomes, well, who are my peers? Does that include people who work for the government? To what capacity? Or if I am of a certain identity, if I identify a certain way, should my jury be that same way? Should it be the same race? of the same IQ
No,
level.
it's the exact opposite. They're not supposed
So,
to discriminate based on those things. In fact, they're not allowed to.
But what about if you're Amish and you live in an Amish community, but it's in a county that is not all Amish? Are you going to be
Yeah,
judged by your
they still get summons the same way we do. Just yeah, they don't sec. I mean, Sleuthie, you know this, but for the chat or anybody else, they just panel it out to the whole county or whatever municipality as far as that goes. So wherever you live, that's what they consider your peer group. Or
I
if
think
they move the
essentially,
jury pool like here.
yeah, I think it's essentially just meant to be the people in the community who were affected by the crime that you're accused of.
but if those people can't reach, an unbiased decision, you can move it to another community that's also your peers. You see, like it's a little tricky for me.
Yeah, I don't think
It's
I don't
never
like
going to
it.
be flawless.
I just don't know how to make it any better.
I think in the Discord we discussed the professional jury thing, and I think one of the conflicts you get is it would be a low paying job because especially if you live in Indiana, there's not a lot of money to go around, and then people know exactly who to bribe all the time. Like
Yeah,
if they can go find you, and
that's
they're supposed like the whole idea of hiding the jurors. That's relatively new for the most part, like because of all the last 4 or 5 years and that stuff. Normally, your names are out there and all that on most cases. It's
they
generally
used to
contentious
put them on
ones.
the television, and you could see you
Hmm.
could see the jurors.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, but I
Keeps you
guess that's
honest.
trial and error.
Yeah, I think what Wissall says, the educating folks. I mean, because that's the best system. You want the regular people um, being the decider rather than the government, unless you choose to do a bench trial. And I don't know that bench trials are for murder. I don't know if that's even an option on that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can have a bench trial. It's just then you're essentially kind of the idea is that you'd be removing the emotional part, right? So the idea is, well, if I have a judge do this, then they'll only look at the law
Hmm.
and the evidence, and that's all they'll consider. But I don't know. I also am of the opinion that like judges are people too.
Yeah, and they don't. I was talking to Zero about that, like this thing in Delphi where the judge just sides with the state. It's pretty normal. Like I've watched a bunch of trials. I'm sure you have too, Sleuthie. Like they're not. I'm just gonna throw a number out there. 70-80% of the objections and like go to the state. That just seems to be the norm on all that.
What if they had something like the Supreme Court has, where like they have multiple judges, and then like they kind of deliberate?
Well, it would depend. Would they have to be unanimous? Because it seems like a lot of the Supreme Court decisions are based off of majority.
True.
Hmm.
Well, like, what if there's like a hung jury, and then it goes to like the judges or something? I don't know.
Well, and then remember, it's not just contentious murder trials, because a lot of this stuff would have to go down the boat to your speeding tickets and your all kinds of infractions. In smaller areas, even in bigger areas, the backlog's already there. So I don't know how to fix it and toss more money at it, get more resources. I think that would probably help.
Like I said, if your burden is beyond a reasonable doubt and 12 people the first time can't all conclude that they met their burden, then I feel like that should just be the end of it. I think it would incentivize, well, see, everything could swing both ways, right? It could incentivize them to make sure that, and by them I mean like prosecutors, make sure that they do everything right, and act within the law and have a built case that is strong enough to remove all reasonable doubts, right? But at the same time, it could also, because it would be more difficult, it can cause, I'll say, like, shortcuts.
What you mean?
Like maybe things not being done. Well, first of all, we have to consider the fact that most cases don't go to trial. Like, we're talking about trials, but most cases don't end that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because they take a plea deal.
Yeah, so then you'd have to consider, well, if it was more difficult to meet the burden because they know that if they go back there, if the jury goes back there and all 12 people don't automatically agree on first votes, right? Then what other tactics? So, for instance, a plea deal will become more important than it is now. I mean, I think most prosecutors would tell you they would much rather get a plea deal, or someone plead guilty than go to trial.
I feel
For sure.
like you would end in less plea deals because people would know they have a better chance in court.
Yeah, I've literally, Sleuthie, I've literally heard the argument made that if people in bigger municipalities, even smaller ones, if they were to request jury trials on small things, you could overload the court to where the prosecutors would just start dropping charges on minor offenses because they can't handle it's not even possible. It's how a
Well,
lot of the
maybe they
counties
should do
are.
that. Like, maybe they should
Yeah,
drop that stuff. Like, I know
absolutely.
in jails and prisons they'll like matrix them out because like our bail system too is just like ridiculous. I don't know. I think it's unfair that like somebody with money can just bail out and then fight their case, and somebody without is gonna plea out because they want to get out of jail.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether they're
Yes.
guilty or not. So
I think
Yes.
I would encourage, and it's easy to say from where I'm sitting, I would encourage people to not take plea deals on things that they didn't do. However, if your only two options are, let's say, 10 years if you lose versus pleading guilty to, whatever it is, and you've already been in jail for
like this
6 months,
suitcase murder.
yeah, and it would only be a year. Like, most people, they're going to say, well, I would rather just get it done and over with so I can go home instead of taking my chances with this and then potentially ending up being in prison forever,
Mm-hmm.
or for
Sure,
10 years.
Sleuthie, Sterling,
if they decide it's in their best interest, then sure. The question becomes like with public defenders being paid by the state, are they incentivized to strike those plea deals? Are they paid per case, or are they paid for their time? Are they paid a flat fee for every case that they take? Therefore, if it ends in a plea deal, they can move on and get paid for the next one,
are you
or
talking
do they
about
get
public defenders?
No,
yeah?
I think you get paid by the hour.
Their salary. Their salary. Yeah, most of them are salary. They don't. I'm pretty sure, like, if you're actually not just contracting on as one, if you're actually like in the public defender office, I'm pretty sure their salary, and it's
Okay,
not very
I don't
high.
know. I know prosecutors are salaried,
Yep.
Nick McClelland
but
isn't.
Yeah, he
he's
is.
salaried, yeah.
Okay, but what about Andrew Baldwin?
Baldwin was not a
Paid by the
typical public defender in this case. He's like a
Right?
private attorney that takes on big cases. So he's paid what, $100 an hour, Sleuthie?
Yeah, I mean, and
Plus all
that's
of his
different.
legal fees they bill for.
Yeah.
But
And
he,
I mean,
like, if you got a ticket, Sterling, the
uh
regular public defender person, I'm pretty sure a lot of those guys have salaries. Depending on how small your area is. If you're in a smaller area, it might be somebody like Baldwin. But if you're in a city or something, they're salaried employees, from what I know. Some of them can take on kind of a salary per case thing, but it's not an hourly rate type of deal, generally.
okay, all right. Well, even that becomes a problem because if you can afford a better defense, like I guarantee you, if Richard Allen had, like, let's say Bob Durst from the Jinx, if he had $12 million to throw at his attorneys, I think he would have got off.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Or
And so,
what's his name? Jose Baez? Somebody like that.
which one was that?
the guy from the Casey Anthony and that doctor in Ohio that the anesthesiologist they were trying to railroad.
Well, and I think not just the cost. I mean, I think without a doubt that if you have more money to fight a case, that you're likely to be more successful. But not just with attorneys. I think also then it carries over into like the types of experts that you can pay,
Yes.
things like that. So
Experts, your PIs, your
yeah.
research, other lawyers consulting with you for different defense, muddying down everything by throwing out motions like left and right, just burying them. And it's, I mean, kind of what the state does to smaller attorneys, like what we saw here.
Well, even something as simple as having the funds to pay multiple people to even do something as simple as, well, maybe not simple, but something as necessary as sorting through discovery.
I didn't realize Aaron Hernandez used Jose Baez. Nick Jacks. He's really good. He's a high profile guy. Sorry.
Yeah, being limited by the judge sets up biases, whereas someone who isn't limited for their funding to put up their own defense is a problem. The money is a problem. And also what someone said earlier was the emotions that come into play. And I feel like even in the courtroom, there's a lot of emotions. And with debates, I feel like there's a lot of people who can win a debate, but that doesn't mean that they're right. They were just kind of like a better debater or something. And if you wanted to take that out of it, I know this sounds crazy, but follow me. I was thinking of jobs that would be better off suited by AI, right? And if we could develop a program that it was done by AI, and AI had all the case law, it had all the facts of the case, it read all the discovery, and it presented it like in the same, maybe even the same voice, or the same avatar to the defense and the prosecution. Would that be more fair?
That's a really interesting. That's an interesting thing to say, because that juror was talking about like how they were dressed and like how she thought they were looking at her and stuff. So that's interesting.
So you mean the AI presenting it to the jury, or the AI processing the case to come to a decision?
The jury would be human, but the prosecutor and the defense would be AI.
So it would take out like all variables, like it would
AI.
Everything would be
well,
the same.
I think AI wouldn't present emotional arguments to a jury.
Bingo.
Yeah, that's what you mean.
But the things such as details, photos, things like that, though, I think still leaves a jury up to an emotional decision. Not that I think it should be taken over by AI. But, that still leaves them, if a robot tells you that a bloody tear is going down the cheek of a child, rather than an attorney, a human attorney, I think that a human looking at the photo and hearing that description is still going to be emotional, Yeah, but I'm not saying they shouldn't be.
Yeah, but it shouldn't depend on the persuasiveness of a person or how good their lawyer is. It would even the playing field between poor people and rich people if it was up to AI. You see what I'm saying?
What their outfit is,
or even what they look
the
like.
same suit every day.
I think some of the stuff they've tried with that has ended up, like when they've used programs to do some of the stuff, it actually ends up hurting minorities because they factor in like the human element of the judge.
I don't think he's talking about minorities. He's just talking about like
no. I'm saying they've actually tried some of this stuff this year. They've tried programs to run trials that are already done.
Does our current system, negatively impact minorities?
Yes, but it was way worse. I'll have to find it. I'll find it for Fishy and I will send it to you. But there was something where they did, and it was massively over sentencing and charging minorities on things because it removed the ability to for the compassion part of it.
So, I mean, yeah. So, like, it would get rid of even something as simple as, and you really might not think so, but again, I think it all comes back to like we're humans. Even if like one of the attorneys on one particular side or the other is good looking to a juror, they might pay more attention to that person, regardless of whether they're better at, more eloquent at giving their arguments and things like that.
I think that they definitely do, and that's what that juror said. She said that that like what's her name? The female attorney on the
Diener?
prosecutor side. Yeah,
Mhm.
the Diener, that she looked very professional and that she didn't wear the same suit twice. Like that's not the things that you really want like the jury to be like paying attention to too much. Like I
Right.
mean, I get it. I do. I understand. Like you're sitting there, so you're gonna notice
Teddy
that kind
said
of
she
stuff.
was wearing loud dresses, bright
But
greens and stuff.
but you know, so you could make the argument that we should take away the visual aspect of it. So, but even if it was a voice, that could also present a bias, because if that voice was more pleasant to you, if you identified it as one of your own, perhaps,
That's
then you
true.
might be, yeah. So then, how does that work? It would only work if it was like the same voice for each side, which may be confusing, but or no voice at all, and it was only like transcripts. It would be weird though.
If
I
if
think
I'm being so for real, everybody knows that I'm weird with voices. So like some voices just, I mean, I can't. They just are like now. I could be super interested. Like there's someone that I am very interested in the things that they say, but like I can't watch 4 hours of a live stream because I just can't. The voice, like even an accent, a voice, anything like that can just. I have that whatever that is where you like are
oh
really
no, I
bothered by certain
understand.
sounds. Oh my God. So
I
I
love
agree with that.
Michelle After Dark, and I'm not allowed to listen to her without headphones on at home because Bailey gets pissed.
Yeah.
She doesn't like her voice.
Oh, that's the one that says, "My name's Michelle. I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well." That's right.
Yeah.
My name's Michelle. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, she's barred from being on the speaker at home.
Oh my God. It's not mean either. It's just, I agree with
Yeah,
Sterling. You know, we are sensory type people. So even, and like you were just saying, you know, you're in there for all that time. You're going to notice different things like what people are wearing. And then going along that same line, you're going to start looking at the defendant. You're going to start looking at the victim's family members. You're going to start watching their reactions. You know what I mean? It's all just very, it's a lot of overload of emotions uh, and other variables, like you said, of, you know, does Sleuthie like to see females in positions of power, right?
Right.
So if the defense team doesn't have a female attorney, am I more apt to like the prosecution team if they have two?
Yeah, it
I thought
plays into
they
your.
both upgraded a lot when they added females to their teams.
I think they should have one. Like I think that there should be a mix, not even just for what we're talking about now, but I think just in terms of handling witnesses and things like that. I think that's a trial strategy that goes into it too. I think sometimes juries are more open to listening to a female cross-examine a victim's sister. I'm just using that as an example. Than a man. Like this juror, I don't think she would have appreciated if like Rosie cross-examined Kelsey. I think it would have put a bad taste in her mouth right away.
Yeah, I think she did appreciate. I heard her say that she appreciated the female lawyers interviewed like the female people on the jury stand, and but like it shouldn't matter. What if they didn't? Does that mean the person is more likely to be guilty? And we
Right.
remove all these biases. The more biases we remove, the better off it would be. I feel like.
Mm-hmm. It's complex for sure. I want to criticize it in many different aspects, but at the same time, I have no I have no recommendations on how to effectively fix all of it. You know, maybe there is none.
yeah. Upon having this conversation, I think we should also take a second. We have as far as it goes, we have one of the best systems that you can have on the entire planet, as far as I know.
I don't
From what
agree
I
with that at
researched.
all. I don't
Where
agree with that at
a
all.
lot, there's other countries, like even in Canada,
Sterling,
you
why
can
don't
say,
you
I'm
agree
getting
with
a
that?
lawyer, and they can still ask you questions while you're sitting there. They can just keep bothering
Yeah,
you.
but they're way nice
There's
about the way they ask. They're like very
Oh, they
kind,
do the
like
same.
the
They
whole
They
definitely
do
time.
the
are.
same. They do the same kind of stuff. I've watched a lot of interrogations in Canada, and
So
some of them
have
get
I.
nasty.
They
Some
give
of
you
them
the
get real nasty.
blankets. They give you a blanket, that paper blanket, looks like a tablecloth from the dollar store. But those are, and again, those are all tactics too, though. I mean, letting you smoke inside the interrogation room, that's a tactic. I'm, not letting you smoke, even though you can, because they know that you're anxious because you want to go smoke. And if you say such and such, then you'll be allowed to go smoke. It's just, there's a lot of different things, but I also would be curious to hear why Sterling thinks that we don't have the best system.
Well, it's hard to say which one's the best. Maybe I should say we don't have the best that it could be. We could borrow from the others where I think that in the parts where I think they have it right. Like, for example, the length of time between when you're arrested and then when you go to trial is very different. Like, what was it, about 2 years that Richard Allen had to wait? And in other countries, it's like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, and
Also in the Canadian police, they can't lie in the course of an interrogation. Or I know, like in the UK, they can't. Maybe the Canadians too. I'm not sure, but certainly that would be a better system, right? You're not tricking people into false confessions.
I agree. I agree with the whole length of time that it's so for instance, so here, if I waive my right to a speedy trial, right, which is not unreasonable when you consider something like, if we're just talking about this case, let's say speedy trial 60 days. I don't know that it can be expected for public defenders to get through and effectively represent you and go through all the evidence that there might be, not even necessarily that pertains just to you, because there's a lot more that goes into it than that, in 60 days. But if I can't, say I'm the public defender, if I can't get through that in 60 days, and now you have to waive your right to a speedy trial, well, it might be 4 years before we go to court. Like, I lose. Now, I do have to say, I like in Indiana, this is going to be rare, but I do like what they do in terms of that at any point in time, they can request a trial within a certain number of days. But you see how that backfired. You know what I mean? That would have worked very well had they not been kicked off, because they would have went when they were ready, versus now it's a whole ass another year before we can start talking about it again. Hey, DB, is that the real DB?
I have no idea. I assume so.
Yay.
Yo, what up?
Oh my
What up,
gosh. I didn't think
What's
you
up,
would come.
dude?
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Happy to see you.
Happy to be seen.
How can we improve the jury system, DB?
I think rock, paper, scissors between the prosecutor and the defense attorney is the only true way to ensure a fair trial.
Oh, that's funny.
What about dueling? 10 paces, turn.
Nerf guns.
No, make it fun. It's got to be real ones, but black powder guns, not semi-auto.
This is DB's other channel. That's funny.
I'm a channel
Right.
collector. What can I say?
Yeah.
Like Funko Pops.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody get quiet. It's
I
awkward.
know. Got like awkward all of a sudden.
I just threw out a bunch of crazy ideas and everybody got quiet. That's what it was.
No, I thought you brought up a lot of very
Fishy
interesting
is
points.
swooning over DB. Sterling.
I am
You're
not.
in competition now. I'm just
Oh, God.
teasing you. Jeez.
I swoon over both of them.
Why are you pointing that out to me? I'm not bothered by it. I don't know. It's okay. It's not a problem. Go ahead, swoon. He is swoonable.
Swoonable.
Simping is
That's
not
quite nice.
allowed, Fishy.
Whatever.
So, with all you guys on here, Ron Logan, what's going on with that?
Big fan of his work.
Not I. I'm not into assaults and whatnot.
What work is that? Yeah.
I think he's raised some mighty fine petting
Horses?
farm animals, you know? Some good horses. I heard he's raised
Thoroughbreds,
some
huh?
good rabbits. And you know, he was a reformed man. that got killed by a bioweapon. You know what I mean? What can you do?
I trust no
Yeah.
one who owns a 40 caliber weapon.
On
Well, I
a
shouldn't say
foreign,
40 cal. 40 Smith and Wesson.
he was a foreign man that got killed by what?
A bioweapon,
bioweapon?
you know,
Oh, so okay,
was
sorry.
designed to take him out to cover up the rest of the outstanding issues in this case. I feel like sometimes.
Are you talking about
Gotcha.
the beer bug now? We have descended.
He's kidding.
I
He's just
know, so
kidding.
am I.
I'm sorry, I'm really
But-
derailing this thing. What were you guys talking
No,
about
you're
before?
not.
The jury system.
How to improve it, like how you can improve the whole justice system, I guess, is a better way of explaining it. But you know, and we all threw out a bunch of ideas. But yeah, we also said we were going to talk about Ron Logan, so it's whatever. Unless you had something to add to a better justice system, DB.
Well,
Because go ahead.
yeah, I think as far as the systems go, there's definitely some reform needed for sure. But I think the adversarial system can be an issue in general because it's such a competition. I also think that small town DAs, being a political head of an office, a public servant, and an elected prosecutor prosecuting felony cases up to murder, it's a lot of
And
one
intertwined
person.
with a family.
Sure, yeah. I mean, who else is gonna do it, right? I mean, he can say that he doesn't have any conflict. He loves saying that. So I guess it would be up to a judge to make a decision based off of motion from the defense attorneys saying that there is a conflict. So I guess oftentimes that's not the priority of the defense attorneys.
How can we remove that?
I think that in a small town like this, the idea would be to hand the case off to a state prosecutor, to a special prosecutor, but there's things in this case that were in place that were probably never going to be able to be handed off to a state prosecutor, and they probably never wanted that, so they just kept it.
DB, what do you feel about like Jerry Holman being the one to investigate the leaks? Do you think that is like a conflict at all?
I don't know about a conflict necessarily. I think that you have how many other investigators? So you get to the point where it's just there's so many other investigators. There's so many other people that could have done it. Him being a witness in the case, him being a witness potentially in this motion, the criminal trial against the attorneys inside of the murder case. You just send somebody else. You just do it as an institution, as a bureaucracy. Just send another fucking dude. You got dudes. Send them. Send other people. You don't need Jerry Holman going. And it seems like maybe he kind of elbowed his way in there and he wanted to do it himself. So it's bizarre and could end up being a really big issue for him. Potentially, now that maybe some more information is going to come out of the case and this other case in Fisher. Yeah,
I agree with that. Jeremy Holman doesn't have to do everything. How do you guys feel about like the press conference at the end and them bringing in the defense counsel into like that, and also like Doug Carter being like Jerry Holman is not a liar in the press conference? Anybody?
I think the whole thing was unprofessional and that stuff. Funny as the public, but on both sides of it, like they should have just shut up, all of them. But
I felt like it's been, 8 years? And you finally have the opportunity to say something and you focus a majority of your comments on the defendant's representation, things that they did during litigation, making accusations about other things that happened. It just seemed like an inappropriate, like, this is not the time and the place.
This is not the day.
Yeah,
for
it
that.
felt like priorities were a little bit skewed in terms like even, and I'm not saying anything. I've not had to read a victim impact statement. I'm not judging in that way, but I just felt like if I was in communication with them, I would have encouraged more talk of the victims and how the crime impacted you as a family member of the victim rather than what the defense attorneys did and how that impacted you. Like, if you're going to talk about that, then you could talk about in your victim impact statement all the speculation throughout the years and people making accusations against the family. Like, you could have brought all of that stuff in, and it's just that's not the time or the place. It's simply for you to tell the judge how the crime affected you and how you're affected by your loved one not being here anymore.
I feel like even if Holman is in charge of the investigation or whatever, and I feel like anybody who was involved in the investigation should be allowed to testify, and it shouldn't be up to the judge to decide who on that investigation team can come up there and tell their side of it, as well as like if you get into back to Ron Logan, she shouldn't be able to decide who has a nexus.
Oh, I mean, I think that I do agree in the sense that I don't think that you should just be able to accuse every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the town. I think that there needs to be a little more to it than just, well, it wasn't him, so it could have been any of the 5 people up here with me. I think for 2
Not
reasons.
it.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't be able to do that, but I also think it's not really effective when you're talking about something that you're arguing in front of a jury. I think it's generally more effective when you say it was not so and so, it was specifically this person or these people. But I think
But
that her
but
discretion, her being given as much leeway to decide what is a nexus and what isn't. And what really bothers me is that we still don't know like what she thinks a nexus is. Now we know that at the trial, when it got brought up again, that she made the comment that there was no nexus, there was no DNA. But that can't be what she's going off of because Richard Allen's DNA was not at the scene either. So I think not having a defined nexus, I don't know. I think a lot of what confused me about her was no explanation for the rulings that she's made. So it makes it more difficult to swallow when she says things like there's no nexus, and it's like, but what about what is a nexus? If so and so painting a rune on a tree in their own blood that they're openly talking about, and there's this thing on a tree, it, isn't a nexus, or knowing the victim, and let's say, I don't know, I could go on and on about this, about potential nexuses or nexi. I don't even know
Nexi.
what is it.
I don't know. It sounds like that would be right. Nexi.
But I think that the amount of discretion that a judge has to determine if that is or isn't, especially if they have a hair twisted up their butt for you specifically, and you having no way to go above them for an answer. I don't know.
right, when it's up to a person, a human, to decide what they should allow in the testimony, that seems like it's biased, and like, you know what I mean, like whereas the only solution I could figure was they should be allowed to present anything, because why is this ballistics evidence, like, more, why is that admissible but Ron Logan isn't, but the Odinism isn't? I don't understand the basis of that. It seems subjective to me.
Well, it is essentially. It's
Mm-hmm.
She subjectively decided what was a nexus and what wasn't. The problem is it wasn't applied across the board. Well, it was in a sense that it was applied across the board to anyone that wasn't Richard Allen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, she excluded Ron Logan, but never said, okay, what is their nexus? Like, I know that they had the 3 days of hearings and whatnot, but first of all, we can't say they didn't prove that there was a nexus simply because she said there wasn't. We don't even have all the transcripts yet. I just
The Ron Logan confession to the other inmate, is that new information? Which part of that is like new? Because I felt like we had heard that before.
well, it's newly relevant. So
It's-
newly discovered versus newly relevant. So like him saying that in 2017 became relevant in 2024 when the pathologist was sitting on the stand and decided to opine that he thought it could have been from a box cutter.
But it wasn't relevant enough for the defense to be able to present it.
Well, we don't know if they did. So one of the things we don't know about all the sidebars. And I know at one point, so this Davis guy, he was subpoenaed. He was one of a group of people who were subpoenaed to testify at the trial. And when they went to, because they have to like renew their request. So when she said in the motion, when she granted that motion for Nick, it was all like considered excluded, but only to the degree, like they had to bring it back up at trial. And if they went to sidebar, let's say Core said that, and they brought it up at sidebar that they then wanted to bring in Mr. Davis to talk about Ron Logan saying about the box cutter. We don't know that she didn't rule that that wasn't a nexus, and no, they couldn't do that.
Right. Maybe because Ron Logan had been cleared.
Not according to the state.
Yeah.
And also,
okay.
like the doctor, the pathologist, he should have, like, if he was in his garage and thought like, oh yeah, this could very well be a murder weapon, he should have like gone in and like put that in his report, and he didn't do that. So like essentially, like the defense kind of like found out about it on the stand, which like then they're supposed to like go back through all discovery and like link that to that statement or whatever. I don't know if did we know about that confession? Like I know we knew about the one guy, but like criminality, I think said yeah, right here. We knew about James Hash, but she had never heard of Ricky Davis confession. I don't know.
Which one's that?
Specifically. Not everyone's brains work that way, where like all of a sudden this doctor is sitting here and he mentions the word box cutter, and like you do like the that's a Raven stare, and you're like honing in on where you saw box cutter, and you're like, oh shit, what's his face said that Ron Logan said that. You know what I mean? Like in the heat of the moment, like if you're not prepared for that because you have no clue until he's sitting in front of your face that he's going to say that about the box cutter.
So
how do you really know?
The Haas confession was with as a cellmate of Ron Logan. He was convicted of murdering somebody in Carroll County, unrelated to this case, I believe. But he's the one that, if you guys have ever seen the very shaky writing confession about Ron Logan, that's him. Yes. But something I wanted to go back to this newly discovered Ron Logan evidence, and something to consider for people that are having a hard time with whether or not this makes it a compelling case for Ron Logan being the killer, is that this is a legal argument. I know I've said this a couple times today, different chats, just screaming into the void.
Go ahead.
That, it's a legal argument. This isn't about his factual innocence or Ron Logan's factual guilt. This is saying that at trial, they wanted to bring in Special Agent Adam Poole's testimony and some of the evidence that he cited in his FBI interview form about his cell phone pinging, about Brad Weber's cell phone pinging near the location. Wanted to bring in information about Ron Logan and the Brad Weber stuff. And this is just stuff that they could have corroborated through prior testimony that was going to be at trial that was unknown, that seen through a different light, the evidence that they had could have been used to rebut it. Just like if they would have known he was going to say box cutter, they have a confession that now has a nexus because this dude changes his theory. Just like Brad Weber changing his alibi, they now have this new evidence that they can go back and look in the discovery and then present. It's just a more it's a more compelling legal case or legal rebuttal than it is, anything factual about the innocence of their defendant, I think.
Thank you for that. Excellent.
I think I understand. It's the difference between determining Ron Logan's guilt or innocence versus whether or not they should have been able to present it at the trial. And I feel like if they were able to, they would have, right? So I feel like they weren't. Because there was no nexus? Why? It was his property.
Logan?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't fulfill the transportation order for Ricky to be called. So they got a transportation order and a subpoena for him, and they weren't allowed to call him.
And it would have been hearsay any other way, other than from him. Him testifying to what Ron Logan told him directly wouldn't have been hearsay. But, even bringing the guy who wrote those horrendous notes about what Reese was telling him about what Ron Logan said would obviously be hearsay. So the only way to have even gotten that specific stuff in would have been to have Mr. Davis show up at trial and testify. But they have to be allowed to do that by the judge. Also, I agree with DB, and I do want to also say that another purpose of this is getting certain pieces of evidence into the record to be able to bring it up from the appellate attorneys. So appellate attorneys, they could have only gone on what was on the record. So if this stuff wasn't now on the record, it's not an argument that could have been brought up. The van, the timing of the van, the time it got home, all that stuff, none of that could be brought up.
If it was on the record or presented to the jury?
If it wasn't on the record, meaning the appellate attorneys aren't getting all the discovery. They can't just bring up whatever they want. They can only bring up things that were shown to the jury, things that were done at hearings, pre-trial, testimony from hearings and at the trial, motions that were filed, exhibits that were filed with the motions. If it wasn't in there up until this point, then they can't use that in any arguments. So for instance, people were talking about why the defense didn't bring this up then. One of the ways that the appellate attorneys could go is arguing ineffective assistance.
Counsel.
Because they didn't. But they would need examples of that. So
what are they saying with Ron Logan? Because I haven't had time to delve into it for 8 hours. Fiend ridiculed me on Twitter for it. I was like, I just wanted to ask somebody who could sum it up in a couple sentences. Are they saying he's the guy, or are they just pointing to a lack of transparency with him?
No, they're essentially saying that all they're saying is that the doctor on the stand brought up.
Open the door.
Well, he brought up this box cutter thing, which was said to be one of the things that only the killer would know. Same with the van. And here we are showing you from a couple months after the murders. Here's Ron Logan, whose property they were on, who was pinging near the bridge at 209 or whatever, and was also pinging within a certain range of the victims at 10-something. And he was telling someone about this box cutter that he used. It really opened up for me something like I was like, what things were they not releasing that only the killer would know? Because I feel like every day, particular things that, for me, something only the killer would know. If I hear somebody say that one of the girls, and I say this everywhere I go, if I hear somebody say, or I read it somewhere, that someone mentioned in 2017 that one of the girls' wounds was vertical and how many there were, and that the other girls were horizontal. Like, that's not something that you saw at the viewing because you saw they had scarves on. It's not like that is intimate knowledge, and it would have been far more compelling for me than I did something with my gun on the bridge and dropped a bullet, and
Right.
I saw a van, you know. But with Ron specifically, it's basically just they're saying that that's one of the things only the killer would know. It was very specific, and it's said to now be, as of the day he testified at trial, it was thrown out there as a murder weapon to the jury, something that would have perhaps changed a juror's mind would have been the fact that Ron Logan in 2017 said that he had killed him with a box cutter.
Right. That maybe should be a nexus. And I was never satisfied as to his alibi. I'm still not clear as to, and maybe DB and the other people here can help me. Like, I was never satisfied as when he was where and how they proved it.
There's not one.
I mean, I know there's video of him at the dump by
I think
himself.
they interviewed one of his rainbow fish, and they said that he was there the whole time.
He was at the transfer station. It was like the last 10 minutes before noon, like 11:53 to 11:58 or something like that.
But this
And
whole fish store, the pizza place, I'm not clear on it.
the pizza place was like a week later or 2 weeks. It was the 27th. And the fish thing, they had a receipt. I can't remember. I feel like it was 5/13. I could look real quick, but they found a receipt in his house when they did the search warrant that said that he had checked out at the fish place at 5 whatever on the 13th.
Or maybe
But that
somebody
still leaves.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That still leaves him pinging at or near the bridge at 2:09. And then I don't know what time he would have had to leave to go to the fish store, but it would have been after 3:30.
And it doesn't satisfy me that was him making that purchase. It could have been someone else. You sent him with their debit card. I don't know.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, I would imagine, to me, he looks like one of those, like, I don't put my money in a bank men. Like, I pay cash for everything.
Yeah.
Hey, I represent that statement.
You see what I mean? Well, no, like my grandpa was the same. Like,
Hello.
thank God he never was. Thank God he never was robbed, because, like, I mean, thousands and thousands of dollars, like, in his house, because he's like, why am I going to pay a bank to, like, watch my money? I'm not going to pay you to hold my money.
Yeah, he had a bunch of, like,
know how much I make.
He had a bunch of gold coins.
That's why my mattress is so firm.
$2 bills.
Are you serious?
So it could have been, I don't know. I also think it's compelling, and I'm not saying that he did it, but I, like you, I would struggle to understand how he was cleared. It's compelling to me, the argument that he called the cousin or whatever he was and specifically asked for an alibi during the time that no one knew that a crime had been committed yet.
Right. And
also some of the things, like in the Davis stuff that was just in this recent motion, he was already in prison for years before the crime happened. So there's particular things that I just wonder how he would have possibly known these things unless Ron did tell him. Vinny on Court TV did pull up the thing where it said, what is it?
Good friend of mine, Vinny Politan.
Hot.
Maybe you can help him with his audio.
Perhaps. I do have a quip about that, but then I have to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Don't hate. Create. Hate, create, whatever. I mean, I just know you as fishy, So I've heard a lot of people say, what?
It's on my thing. I have it on my thing. It's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've heard I've read a lot of people saying today that who believes Ricky Davis? He's a felon and he's in prison. He's not to be trusted. And hey, if you don't want to trust him, that's totally fine. And yes, I believe there are some people in prison that are not trustworthy. Sometimes, yeah, of course, you would think, right? Now, something funny, kind of interesting about Ricky Davis, he's sentenced to 40 years in prison. That's a long time. That's 15 or what? That's 20. That's like almost the time for some of the degrees of murder in
Like
Indiana.
felony murder.
Yeah. So if anyone in the chat could guess what this gentleman is in prison for, who doesn't actually know, what do you think it is? 40 years.
Don't say.
Drugs.
January 6th.
Oh, he probably wishes he was in fucking prison for January 6th right now. But he's in meth. Yes, meth. The production of meth for distribution within 1,000 feet of a school. Now, it's actually, there's a very interesting appellate case about his decision that they charged him with that. He didn't lie. He called the cops, him and his buddy that were cooking, a little clandestine operation, a la, Ron Logan's backyard. And they were cooking and they got fucking thwacked out on the good shit and they called the cops on themselves. Okay?
Sounds like a good idea.
I mean, fuck it, you're done,
That's what they teach you in Dare.
Right. And so, yeah, it was literally a fucking, it was a dilapidated YMCA. And I guess that's called a youth educational institution. And it was 995 feet from the house he was cooking meth in. But if you measured it from where the actual address was, not where they measured it from the corner of the parking lot, it would actually be over 1,000 feet. But this man went from a 2-year bid to a 40-year bid because of these enhancements, right? But he took a plea deal. So he admitted to it. He called
took a plea on 40 years?
No. He took an open plea and got sentenced to 40 years.
Oh, no.
He took an open plea thinking that he was going to get a reduction, a downward departure, and they end up smoking his boots for 40 because of this enhancement, right? So, yes, he's a convicted manufacturer of methamphetamine, but he fucking called the cops on himself and took a plea and committed an allocution at his plea sentencing. So it's interesting. Like, if anyone is like kind of credible in the way that they don't on the record have something that they lied about, not saying that he's like the ideal inmate to do that. It's just interesting that you don't see those circumstances around other inmates that often, especially ones.
Did he have a previous criminal history that factored into that 40 years or no? Or do we know?
It wasn't. I know he did have a history of, I think he had retail theft and small like addict type crimes, but he was fairly young when he got that charge, and it didn't weigh his previous criminal history. I don't think was a sentencing enhancement.
That's insane. I'm not a fan of the drug war.
Yeah, it's a really perfect example of that, but I don't know. Who knows if he's telling the truth or not? It's just interesting. But I appreciate y'all having me and kicking it.
Yeah, cheers, DB.
Cheers.
Yeah, take care, DB.
So when one person confesses to their psychologist, that's admissible. But when one person confesses to their sister, it's not. Or in DB's case, what about this jail cell defendant? Somebody confessed to him and he's not able to testify. Why? How do you justify that? And was he incentivized? Did he get something for that little written confession thing? Did they promise him something? It's hard to say.
It should be on my case or whatever if his sentence was reduced. So probably not.
Okay, so then what incentive does he have to lie about it?
Well, I mean, if it panned out at the time, that might have been like you get the reward if it leads to the arrest, etc. That might be the thing. I don't know.
Okay.
But they also hose those guys all the time too, so Your point stands. Yeah, I've often wondered why they ruled him out, or especially with the geofencing stuff and him being.
I agree with that, Dan. I don't know why they would, but who knows?
Because the geofencing stuff would
We'll never
determine
know.
he was around there at the time they designated. I don't remember all of it, and I can't accuse the guy of doing it, but he was always my favorite guy to look at.
I think I'm also just a little bit suspicious and leery about the way that just people in general were cleared. There's still a question of how Richard Allen was cleared. No one
Oh my
seems
gosh,
to.
yeah. I want to know that so bad. They act like they
I
have
don't
no
even
idea.
know if he was. I'm
He
still
was.
confused on it
They
too.
said that
on
I
the
know they
minute.
wrote. I know they wrote it there, but I don't know if they actually ever talked to him again. Doesn't seem like they did. And I don't mean that in a biased way. I mean, it literally seems like they never even followed up on it at all. Am I incorrect on that?
Are you talking
I
about?
don't think they followed up at all.
Richard
I
Allen.
can believe you're correct. That
Yeah, they marked
just
him
put it-
clear, but they never even talked to him, other than the guy who put in the tip.
and
Because I think they would have brought that up in court, right?
Well, and that's the thing. Like Nick recently did an interview where he said, and it was strange, and I can't really figure out what the point is. But you know all the things we've heard over the years about the tip, and anyway, and then even at trial from Kathy herself. But then he did an interview, and he said that the tip was not lost. It was not misfiled. It had nothing to do with his street that he lived on being listed as the last name. None of that had anything to do with it. It was because he was marked cleared, and
Yeah.
that to this day they have no idea who cleared him, which I don't understand, because in that Orion system it's marked every time somebody does something and who's doing it. Even if it's something as simple as Dan Dolan went to go speak with him, he thought everything was fine, so he cleared him. Like, that's a reasonable explanation. Why can't we just
Doesn't
say?
it seem like some sort of error in putting it in? I mean, I've tried to think about it from a bunch of different angles. I don't even know. The guy put a tip in, and I don't think he ever said the guy was cleared. So what? Who put it? Who put the tip in? Like originally into Orion? Do they know that? I mean, we don't. I don't think. But who entered it in? I figured that would be the person to go to.
I think Dan Doolin, it was written on that little index, some sort of index card that
Yeah.
summarized his interview with Richard Allen or whatever, and it said cleared on it. But that's what I heard. I'm not sure.
The index card had cleared on it too?
That's what I heard.
Okay.
That's my understanding as well. Dolan cleared Allen. I guess.
Weird.
I don't know.
I don't think Dolan cleared him. Like,
Not even criticize him, just somebody had to do it, and I don't understand why we're not like appointing that person. Like, who cares? Like, it had to be somebody. Who was it?
And also, when I think he testified to that there was all kinds of errors made on it by the dispatch and everything, and they didn't ever correct that even when they put it in. Like, that's weird. I mean, I don't know if that's sheer volume overload. I remember there were civilians putting the tips in. I don't know when that ceased. That whole thing, that whole system and everything's, it's worrisome.
Well, a lot of it is. I still think he did it, but it's my opinion. So
It just seems like you can charge a man who's been cleared, but you can't call a man who's been cleared to, as the defense, to up on that stand to like point to a third party.
That's
Indiana's weird with that, right? And so is Wisconsin, from what Osbrook had said, or Travis. The burden to get third parties in.
Here's my biggest problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm picturing me as a prosecutor. Here the defense is presenting these third-party people. I'm adamant that they were cleared, and therefore I should know exactly how they were cleared. And So
For
why
sure.
do I give a fuck if you? So okay, if you want to bring Brad in, who I know was cleared and exactly how he was cleared, bring him in and go ahead and do that, because then you're just going to look silly when I show the jury exactly how they were cleared and that it's impossible. Then you look desperate.
Bingo.
So I don't understand the put unless there was something about that email. So if you remember, Gull sent, so Nick had hired experts specifically for Odinism. Like, I think Nick was thinking that way. Like, let's just, like, okay, we'll bring it in and I'll get appropriate experts to argue this. It wasn't until Judge Gull sent that email talking about the nexuses and the third party this is. And then shortly thereafter, all of a sudden, despite having experts and probably done loads of depositions with the defense of these people preparing for trial, now he's filing this motion and he wants to exclude it all after she sends that email.
And when that came out and I saw all the stuff that they wanted excluded, I was like, no way is all of that stuff going to get excluded.
Yeah.
And she granted the whole thing.
Like, what does the nexus between a third party have to do with letting in geofencing data? Like, why did she just automatically exclude that? Her order was not specific in any way to explain certain decisions. And I guess that's good for her when it goes to the appellate court, because they're just going to try to figure out what the best explanation is to explain what she did rather than look at her own explanation and decide if it's wrong.
Yeah.
But the blanket exclusion of stuff with no explanation, I think, is just absurd.
I'll never understand the geofencing thing either. There's a
Right.
bunch of it that just for public record.
No,
probably
that
could have
actually
been on there.
pisses me off. I
Yeah.
don't know
Even
why
if
they
it
do
wasn't
what they
in the
did.
trial itself, it was admitted for evidence or something.
Well, as a prosecutor, so what would be the reason to want that excluded? Now, if Richard Allen wasn't in the geofence, you can argue that as a prosecutor that, like, he didn't have his phone and he left it at home because he knew he was going to commit a crime or whatever. The argument goes both ways depending on how it's beneficial. But if he was on the geofence, why would you want that excluded? And the only reason I could come up with is if he left before the crime happened. Then I certainly wouldn't want it in.
I would go with he's a Hanlon's razor. Like, you're just going to try to get everything excluded on both sides. If the judge is going to allow it, just keep taking advantage of it.
You said Hammond's razor?
Hanlon's, yeah.
Okay.
Rather than being nefarious or something, you're just going to keep well, shit, the judge will give me whatever I want, so I'm going to keep asking. Santa Claus is granting all my wishes. Let's take all of it.
I mean,
I'm going to get a PS5, a computer, and a iPhone.
That's true to a degree, in the sense that even when he was listing out the third party people, he was listing people that weren't necessary. Like, Keegan wasn't necessarily brought up to the degree of the other ones where there's more question versus having this convicted pedophile. You know what I mean? Unless that was
We had
going to look
discussed
bad.
this off air, Sleuthie. Was there not a conflict of interest with Ron Logan and Brad Rosie, or
I think Brad
something about
Rosie
they represented him?
or maybe
Not
Baldwin.
Brad.
Yeah, one of them represented
Was
him in a
Baldwin?
previous case. Yeah, it was. I think so.
No,
Yeah, DUI case.
it was someone from Rosie's, like,
It was his previous law firm or something, from my
yeah.
recollection. But
But
because of that, he was ethically not. I
well,
don't remember. At least that's what people said.
Yeah, there's no conflict if he doesn't have any information about Ron Logan. Like, if he doesn't have any privileged information about Ron Logan, which would only be necessary if, let's say, Ron's previous attorney came to Rosie specifically and shared discovery and was asking him to help him work through something. But, like, his charges really were not that. I don't know that you would need a bunch of people's input on that unless he was charged with murder. You know what I mean? Which he hadn't been.
Yeah.
So I don't think there was a conflict there for that.
And how do you prove a nexus if you exclude the geofencing data? Like, certainly the people who were there at the time of the murder should be a nexus.
The geofencing wasn't excluded from preliminary hearings. It was excluded from the trial.
But
Bingo.
why like that's
Yeah,
what
they
it matters
used it
in
in the
trial, right?
prelim. Right, but the nexus comes in the trial or in the preliminary stuff.
But
So yeah,
using it in
I
the
don't think you can justify excluding that.
pre-trial is what got it excluded. So really think about
Yeah.
this. Let's say when they went in for June or whenever it was, if they would not have been told to file the Franks memo, which they were told to do by Judge Cole, and put all of that information in there, it would have been more difficult to then pick through it 100 and some odd pages and write down the things you want to be excluded. So had the geofence not come up in motions where they were like, there was, 3 other phones and they're either witnesses or blah, blah, blah. Y'all know what they said.
Yeah.
Then there would have been no reason to ask for it to be excluded.
And we would have never have heard of it, probably, right?
Well, they would have
We
been
would.
able to bring it up at trial.
Yeah, I feel
Well,
like no matter what it comes out with, it should have been brought up. I don't know it. Like, there's a few people that no matter what the state does, it's cool. But if it's something like that, I don't get it. I don't think we will. We could try to rationalize it, but
I just personally think that Nick would not have moved to exclude any of that stuff had he not been prompted. I think he was prepared to just argue it. And I think that would have been much more reassuring and more fair had you just let it all be there's a lot to be said for at least I can speak for myself, my confidence if the jury would have heard all of these things and still made a decision like this. You see what I mean?
yeah, I'm in
yeah.
the
Because now you're
same boat with
considering it all. You're not just considering the state's case, because that's essentially, most of what they had to consider was all the state's case and the state's theory. Even something as simple as the sticks, they were not allowed to offer a different interpretation of the crime scene. I think that's a problem. It is for me. Because what are we even
Oh,
having a trial for if you're only going to let me know what the state wants me to know?
the blood spatter stuff. This is something Zero Cool and I were talking about. Sleuthie, did they offer any alternative solution or try to impeach Cicero on any of that at all, other than what just happened in the 3-day hearing? Do you know?
So you you have to consider also, and I think we're all aware in terms of resources and how they go.
Oh yeah.
Now, because for me, like, I would have
I
threw
wasn't
all
saying
of
it
my
was a
money.
motive. I just didn't know if they did or not.
I think they had to be very particular about what experts they were bringing in and had to pay. Um, for me, I would have threw as much money as I had to at like a DNA person to test all of that DNA. And not even, okay, so if you can't run it and find a match, you could at least exclude people, right? So Ron Logan, it would have been great to know for sure that all of that was excluded. Or Elvis. If you can't find a match, at least you could exclude Richard Allen, then you could have excluded those people. And that would have been nice to hear. Like at this moment right now, I couldn't say, well, Elvis said that he spit on one of the girls, but his DNA wasn't found at the scene because there was tons of DNA at the scene. We don't even know if it was multiple unknown males or if it was just one all over the place that were
Yeah,
at the
I
scene.
mean, even if you think he's guilty, you find out they didn't test the hair. They supposedly got a family member's DNA over and over again and never tested it. Like, there's all kinds of steps that they just waited to the last minute to do. Even the Cicero blood thing, when we were looking at it last night, wasn't it done in like February 2024?
Yeah.
Dude,
What
and
what
he
I'm
used his own blood. That
Yes.
is the
Yeah,
weirdest
that's not as
shit
uncommon
ever.
as you
But
think.
wait,
Okay. Okay.
he
No,
now
it's really not.
he didn't just use his own blood. He used his own blood and he wanted it to be as close to temperature as possible, right? So He's talking about like drawing blood like at the crime scene, and I'm
Yeah.
sitting there
Right.
reading it, and I'm listening, and I'm going, there were 2 deceased girls that essentially lost enough blood to die. How did you get enough blood to do all of these experiments? You couldn't have. There's no way.
Not just
He
not
pulled
just
out a
that, he
full
had
like Red Cross sample bag
no,
in his.
not just that, he had like a girl there, like putting her hand in his warm, just drawn blood.
Absolutely not.
That is
No, thank you.
creepy.
I mean,
That
I'm
is
all for
weird.
like experiments and whatever, but like at the same time, and I did listen to his interview. I don't know if you guys did.
Oh no, I didn't know they had one with him.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh, Murder Sheets.
yeah. I
missed that one.
have. Well, I shouldn't say because now they've taken and
Oh yeah, I don't.
they've taken to copyright claiming my Google Drive.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, well, they have a pre-sale for their book, so I'm assuming that the crackdown is real because everybody has to go there. But
Oh, they got the legal team behind the publisher. Neat. Interesting.
Plevin, Krebit, whatever we're gonna call him, that's the legal team. But he says things there. He makes one minute he'll say things that are reasonable, such as, I'm going there and I'm just trying to follow like the evidence that I see. So like the bloodstain patterns, I'm following those. But then towards the end, he makes a statement about how essentially when he was brought in February 2024, he was handed the Franks memo, and his purpose was to disprove that, like that something else could have happened besides that, rather than here's the crime scene photos, here's the evidence, not a pleading. Here's the
That's
evidence.
weird.
Tell us how this evidence got here. Like, I just think you're already going in with well, this could definitely be possible, but now I have to show it happened a different way, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Nope. No, it's not, because you can't be objective. That's
Yeah.
weird.
Because now what it's not supposed to be. You see what I mean?
And if it's all about the evidence, why would you spend so much time talking about like Richard Allen just looked weird staring out in the audience? He looked weird. He was looking at me and he was weird. What does that have to do with anything? I feel like there's a lot of that in there too.
Yeah, I can't stand that. Like, he's been in solitary. Like, can you imagine how you would be like looking at people? Like, it's gonna be weird.
It's almost like it wasn't even in consideration.
You don't even have to go that far.
Too.
Just imagine sitting there for 3 weeks. And imagine you right now, if I stuck you in a room with a bunch of people watching you all day, imagine what you would do, even without being in jail. Yeah. Well, even without that, just sit there and let somebody put a camera to your face, because it's like dozens of people. Everybody gets awkward by that.
Yeah.
Can you smile? No. Can you laugh? No. Can you look sad? No. Can you
look serious?
Like not pay attention? Everything you do is scrutinized in every way, no matter which way you go.
Nothing is correct. There's no, they can advise him one way and the other, and it really doesn't matter.
Yep.
Sleuth, let me address this about the people in solitary right now. I am very much an advocate for prison reform. Like, I literally talk to people in my town about prison reform. So I strongly disagree with like putting people in solitary for years and stuff like that. So prison reform is an important issue that people should like pay attention to.
How long should someone be able to be in solitary?
According to the United Nations,
14 days.
It's 15 days. Over 15 days is considered torture, and like it is. We're social creatures, and we need it. It like literally affects your brain.
I hate to tell you, Fishy, at intelligence, we consider that enhanced interrogation, not torture.
Exactly, enhanced interrogation. That is a great way to put it, actually.
Let's also say that, okay, well, I'm putting you, so let's say you're having some mental health issues, and I'm putting you in solitary so that we can get it sorted out and get you treatment so that we can watch you closer to make sure you don't do anything until we've stabilized you. the whole point is to stabilize you and then send you on your way, like not keep you there forever and ever. It would be to make you better so that you can go back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that it's,
I
and
wondered
also
why they never had him ruled, what do you call it, unfit for trial?
well, if you
As
remember,
lawyers.
Walla made a comment about that in her testament, that she had said something to him about determining his competency. But like, I don't even know that she'd be the one that would do that. I don't know that she's qualified to do that. Like, I think that's a particular legal.
I think they do multiple, like the judge would have to order it. So it probably wouldn't be his psychiatrist. She might be able to advise on it, but she wouldn't be the determining factor of it. Maybe I could be wrong.
Well, and it would have to be petitioned by like his attorneys, not her. She's not the one that decides. You know what I mean?
Yep. Shout out Taylor Shabusiness and Sarah Boone, who didn't do nothing. Just saying. Wasn't she ruled multiple times to be incompetent for trial?
Well, she should have taken a plea. That's one person that should have taken a plea deal for sure. Like, I don't know what she was thinking.
You also don't punch your public defender.
Maybe you do.
Or he was incompetent to defend herself, right?
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. Totally.
Sarah Boone didn't get convicted?
She got convicted.
She definitely did.
In fact, she would have gotten 3 years if she would have taken the plea they offered her. What'd she get, 25?
So she did.
She got a life sentence. They offered her a nice plea. It was like 15 years time served plus all this ended up being like 2 or 3 years more. She said no.
We're not sure what Percocent is asking there.
She's saying that I would like to expound on the situation of what you can. Do you want me to drop the link?
I didn't mean to click
come up
that.
here if you want.
Sorry. Woman, if she's referring to that, it might have been 15 years. I think by the end of the actual time she served was like 2 or 3. I can send her a link if you want.
I just put it in the chat.
Okay.
So hopefully we get some dick
wonderful
pics
show
here
tonight,
too.
guys.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming on, Sleuthie and DB. You're not in here, but thank you guys.
And Sterling.
Oh yeah, thank all of you.
I love Sterling. Takes a logical approach to stuff.
And he's funny and he's cool and and I simp for Sleuthie too, by the way. I simp for all of you guys.
Aw.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Oh my gosh. I really want Sterling for you to come on with Greeno because I was like laughing so hard about those questions we like made for him when we were supposed to make questions.
Gosh, that was a fun night. I'm just gonna. That was what I was gonna bring up too. We got Greeno to admit on the hung jury thing. That was fun.
Yeah, I talked to him today, Fish. He was like, he mentioned you. He was like, she wants to have us both on her panel. And that's actually where I was before this. Him and Marv had a panel, and he was last minute. So I was only there for like 10 minutes. And I was like, I got to go.
Yeah, I want him on here.
I didn't know Marv had that. Goodness gracious, I would have been over there.
I didn't either.
Goodness gracious.
Goodness gracious. There's not been one cuss word said on this panel tonight.
Really?
Fuck.
No. Oh. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry. I have Tourette's.
It's fine. Maybe it's because like
Percocent said she's got a date. She missed
a taco
us.
Date.
We love you, Percocent. Enjoy your date.
Taco date. Hey.
Oh yeah.
Shout out to Percocent.
That's like the best place to go. Like get tacos and then get Percocent. I don't know. Anyways, I'll let the adults talk again.
When Fishy, did we cover all the topics? I know there was a few we wanted to go over. I don't want to miss anything.
I kind of like lost my focus. I feel like we were focused. I feel like
marijuana.
I do like the general outline.
Was there anything about like the new, like any of the other things, or just Ron Logan that you wanted to talk about the new thing, the new?
I have like a little clip I could play, and then we could talk about it if you want. Okay.
Oh, Sleuth, what up, big dog?
Yes.
Yeah, Sleuth's been in here for a while.
I was hooking trailers. I was working a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, you're actually doing something?
Yeah.
Don't get paid for that.
I'm salary. I don't get paid for anything.
I know.
Oh,
What
Sleuthie,
video are
what's
we
next
watching?
on your... While we wait, what's next for your... What are you getting into next?
Yeah, Sleuthie.
Me?
Yeah.
Bet. I'm hoping like hell my kid goes back to school tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, it's been zero in the
David,
negatives. Bailey
yeah,
hasn't had school. No
he's
nursing
been to,
clinicals because of it.
he has been to school 2 days since December the 20th, and they were
He's
not
gonna
even
go to
full days.
school until July, bro.
Well, we've been doing like I forced them to do
okay.
they sent their computers home, and so I'm like, you got to get on there and do something, dude, or you're gonna be done when you get back. So like I have to bribe him with like, okay, if you do an hour of that, then you can have your pad for a little bit. He did well today, but I've had it. Like I don't ever want to see another piece of snow ever again. And today it was like -8.
I said I
And
wanted
I'm
to
just
go
like,
down to
built for this.
Texas, and a friend sent me pictures of like 3 inches of snow down in Texas. I'm like,
Yeah,
no,
there's snow in
no.
Florida. I like, wanted to vomit. I thought it was safe.
Team.
That's so annoying because like that's not even the thing. What are they talking about? Try to clear his name. That's not. I think a lot of misunderstanding about what it is that was just filed is causing arguments and confusion that don't need to exist. Nothing about that
Right.
motion is meant to say he didn't do it.
They want a new trial, right?
Well, they want a new trial, yeah, and in my opinion, that's not even saying that he didn't do it. It's saying we want a new trial. But essentially, like really truly a large portion of this is adding things to the record that she could potentially fix. If not, then the appellate attorneys can bring it up to the appeals court, which they
It's
can't
for
if
the
it's not in the
appellate.
record.
Yeah, it's for the appellate attorneys, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but even if the appellate judges think that some of that evidence should have been entered, or they would have entered it, if they see like some sort of evidence that only the killer would know, they could say, yeah, but that alone is enough to, continue to not allow a new trial, right? Because this other evidence is so compelling. It wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, like the appeals lawyers when they go to that court. So this is what's probably going to happen, like on a majority of things that aren't structural error. Is if they say, this evidence should have come in or this should not have come in, it's likely that they'll say, well, regardless, even if we agree with everything you just said, there's still the confessions, and so they likely still would have convicted him. It wouldn't have changed the outcome at trial. So the answer is
That
no.
is that standard. The weird part of
Yes.
that standard is, could a reasonable person still come to this conclusion? And that almost destroys every appeal that you see.
Yes, but something, for example, like the safekeeping issue, that the standard for it would have nothing to do with whether or not the trial outcome would have been different. Whether they decide, like when they go to make the decision of whether he needs a new trial based on that argument, it would not be. They wouldn't be taking into consideration whether or not he would have been found not guilty had it not happened or whatever.
Would that open up a new trial avenue, or would that open up civil lawsuits?
A new trial.
Okay.
I think it's deciding for the jury what they would have decided.
I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's
but
really
yeah.
audacious because I don't know how you do such a thing. How do you assume what someone would have been thinking if they had known something?
Yeah.
No, the key to it should be, was it a fair trial? And
Well,
if
yeah, it
not,
goes down from like reasonable doubt. Like that's what I'm saying is the standard is different. It's not reasonable doubt. It's just could that conclusion, like, is it possible at all that conclusion could have come pretty much? And that sucks for appellate stuff. But I think Andrew Branca says it best: appellate appeals are for losers, and it's not in a mean way. It's just bad. You never want to be in that position.
I don't think it's reasonable to expect to be able to say, well, if the jurors would have known that A, B, and C happened, then maybe they would have voted differently, because there's no way to know that. You don't, unless you talk to each of the jurors. And even then, like if you talk to them 2 years from now and you say, had you known A, B, and C? Would you have changed your mind? Like, they don't know at that point. It's an entirely different temperature.
Well, and circumstances change over time. You learn more stuff, So jurors
Yeah.
So
are
we
going
don't
to change over
we
time.
don't we don't want to watch that news clip then.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm
I'll be
fine.
quiet.
No,
I hate when they do that. Go ahead. Sorry.
A question for you, for Sleuthie, anybody that's legal. This is new, like it wasn't a discovery. That's the first question. The second question is, if this door was open, did they try to get it in the trial, or did they not do it? And now they're trying to, like,
Right.
I guess.
It's confusing because they say new evidence, but that's 2017.
And the problem is with those questions is if they didn't try to get it in the trial, it's done. Like if it was in the discovery with those questions.
So and this is the best that I can explain it, and it took days for even me to understand. Because I thought the same thing as you. I mean, I thought newly discovered means this is the first time I'm putting my eyes on it. I had never seen it before, and it's brand new. Or somebody called something in, and it's newly discovered. Like, so and so said that they found the murder weapon, and we did testing on it, and that was it. That in my head was what newly discovered evidence would be. That's not necessarily what it is. It is newly discovered, and this is not like the legal
No, you're fine.
way, but the best I can explain it is it's newly discovered, like, to be relevant. So prior to Core saying something about a box cutter, that particular detail of Ron Logan's confession was irrelevant because all along it wasn't a box cutter. It was two weapons, one serrated and one not serrated.
Mm-hmm.
Now that he's testified and he's saying that it could have been a box cutter that was the murder weapon, now Ron Logan saying that in 2017 becomes relevant. Because we're talking about something only
what
the
you're
killer would know.
saying is actually making me fear that, because if they didn't bring this up in trial when that was done, if they didn't go and motion the judge on a sidebar or whatever to bring that in, they basically lost the right to use it in this appeal or that. And the new evidence standard for appeal is evidence unavailable to the parties. It could be a Brady violation, could be newly discovered in reality. Like that's the appeal thing where it's not available at the time of the trial. So that makes me fear that.
What the expert said that they had on the news. So I think that there's probably like a little bit more to it. Like I don't think it's like an invalid argument. Like it could be denied, but I think that they definitely have a chance on it.
On top of that, even if that fails, you have the argument then that the appellate counsel can now make, which they couldn't before the filing of this motion, because they wouldn't have this information about Ron Logan and this confession with the box cutter. They wouldn't have that if this motion wasn't filed. But if that argument fails, they now have on the record something that they can use for an ineffective assistance claim.
Because didn't he waive the ineffective assistance to get the attorneys back though?
No.
No.
Okay, I thought he had. Either way, like that's scary. But you guys do understand how hard it is to get an ineffective.
I thought it was pretty clear that Gold, they said Gold denied all third party from being presented to the jury.
Yes, Sterling. But here's the thing: take this back to Murdahl. You guys know the Murdahl trial. I know Sleuthie does. They excluded all the financial crimes out of his trial. Somebody said something stupid. I'm summarizing it. The door got opened. It got brought in. The judge ruled in. Did that happen in this case? Did they try to get it in?
Him? Well,
one of their attorneys or one of their witnesses said something, and it got brought in and basically ruined any chance of a case.
It was the attorney that did it. I can't remember his name.
But the problem with that is that it's up to the discretion of the judge, right? Whether the door's been opened. But again,
Well, that's what I'm getting at is that's the appellate issue. If they didn't raise it, they can't bring the issue on the appellate side, and even to take it into the record, the Supreme
Dan, you have
Court.
to let her finish her thought.
I am.
But at the trial, they did have Reese Davis subpoenaed and set to testify.
Okay,
So
okay.
when Core said that, if they say, okay, it's now our case in chief and we're allowed to call witnesses and we want to call Reese Davis because we want him to testify. He's the only one that can. We want him to testify to what Ron Logan said. And the reason why is because Core testified to this box cutter situation. And now what he said is relevant.
And what
And
DB
she said,
he couldn't tell?
no third party. You don't have a nexus. Then they have no choice. Like all they can do is just say, okay, but now it's on the record that she said no.
Great.
That would be her error.
That's exactly what I was asking. Thank you. That's perfect. That makes sense. Because I was trying to figure that part out.
So I don't feel like that's, if there is newly discovered evidence, which maybe that was just he just misspoke, I'm not sure. But if that's not newly discovered, what about this video of the van? Because I don't remember them trying to enter video of his van elsewhere. You know,
I have another clip to play. I think they actually show that video. So hold on, let me share that really quick.
Yes, please. Perfect.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Do you have all the exhibits and stuff?
I don't, but All Eyes has like the best like repository, I guess is what you call it. I don't know, of like all the information. Which
you go on your Twitter. I'll send you the folder. And I think it's 3B. Exhibit 3B. It's just a 1 minute. It'll say like Exhibit 3B description, and then it has the link to the video, and it's only like a minute. That's really the best one. The other one, I mean, I'm not going to watch 8 minutes for nothing for 5 seconds. These people make me crazy. They literally cause me gray hair.
So don't blame
I like that because that right there is a good avenue for appeal. Like if that's the case, I think gold needs smacked anyways.
Did you send it in Twitter?
Not literally, figuratively smacked. Course.
Right, because if they had that evidence at the trial, I don't understand why they wouldn't have been able to present that when the state is the one who called that witness in the first place, right?
So
it's up to the judge's discretion. Discretion, but the appellate court can smack it. Sterling.
She can play what she was going to play, and I'll be quiet, and then I can help you with it because it's kind of a different argument, the whole van thing.
Well, but Sleuthie, can you put it in our private chat right here? Because I'm not signed into Twitter on my computer. So, like, if you could put that link right there, that'd be the best. Cool.
Teammates Cody Fisher is combing through the filings. He's in studio now with more on what he found. Cody.
Guys, this 23-page filing by the defense says there were 4 main errors with the trial, some of which is tied to evidence, but it also covers potential violations to Richard Allen's constitutional rights. Right after his arrest, Richard Allen's wife paid an attorney $5,000 to represent him. The defense team filed this exhibit, a letter from that attorney to the Carroll County Sheriff saying Allen is his client. The defense claims Allen's constitutional rights were violated because that attorney was not involved in the hearing that sent him to the Westville Correctional Facility. By attacking the safekeeping order, the defense appears to be trying to get his confessions made at Westville thrown out of the trial altogether, claiming he was there illegally.
It's a good strategy to try to say, hey, let's knock out all the confessions, via the Westville thing. He never should have been in Westville. Let's get rid of all of that. So it makes sense that they're doing this.
The defense is also trying to discredit the state's timeline of the murders of Abby and Libby. They claim this video showing a blurry vehicle driving down a road is this white van, the infamous white van Allen later confessed to seeing around the time the girls were abducted. The defense claims the video shows the van arriving after the state says it arrived, but they do admit the time code is 12 hours off.
They're acknowledging this is off. Is there any way to determine that it's exactly 12 hours off? Or is this a situation where it could be 12 hours and 30 minutes, 12 hours and 20 minutes?
The defense also claims newly discovered...
And also, is there any way to determine whether that bookshelf is safe behind them?
Dude,
no, it's not.
Just
I think
the
it's an
last
OSHA
5
violation.
seconds. Like,
It is, man.
like I just like that is not what they're. That's what I'm talking about. Just being just uneducated and not caring to just. I mean, isn't he supposed to be a lawyer? Like, I just don't understand. That is not what they're trying to do. Is get all the confessions thrown out because he shouldn't have been there. It's a totally different argument than what is in this motion to correct errors. And secondly, what did she just say? I forget.
Talking
It's
about
so dumb.
how can you
I don't know.
confirm that it was exactly 12 hours off? Well, how can you
A
confirm
fucking
that?
hearing. A hearing. That's why they're
How
asking for one over and over again. That's the place to show it.
did the Hoosier Harvest Store prove that their time was accurate?
No,
Or
they just accepted that it was. And no
Okay.
one asked them to prove it either. And it wasn't
and
accurate. It was
it
off, and they
sounds like
accepted.
it sounds like it might just be an AM versus PM situation.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, I'm sure
Ready.
that there is additional.
Oh, just for our sponsor's sake, please go out and buy Kevon and Andre's book.
Oh, shut up. No.
That way
no,
we avoid the
nope,
copyright
nope,
strike. Please go
I
out
don't
and
give a
buy it.
fuck. No, don't do it. Don't buy it. Fuck them.
Nobody's gonna buy it.
I don't care. I'm not ever sponsoring them
I know.
whatsoever.
I know. I was making a joke. They're definitely not. That's why I called them Kevon and Andre.
Okay, ready?
Find the book after it
This is
falls
the
off
real
the
clip,
bookshelf.
Sterling.
This
for
is
you.
just the one. This is the 1 minute one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
What are we watching?
This is the exhibit. They basically zoom. So there you can see the time, 2:44:35. You can see it going by back there if you know where to look for it, but then it'll zoom in 2 more times, and it's, to me, clear as day that that's what it is a white van.
Right here.
Baddragon.com affiliate link.
Yeah. You could drop that all day.
Oh my
long.
god,
Bluetooth.
Dan.
Hey, thanks. I haven't seen this. I want to see this. I haven't seen this yet.
Here you go. And then it'll zoom in a third time after this. It's a druggy buggy, it looks like.
Yeah. Right there.
Oh no! One more time.
Yeah, right here. Right there. Oh yeah, that's definitely.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
But and so that's newly discovered, or it wasn't allowed because they didn't allow any third party suspects. You see, like
Wait, what is
Okay.
this?
Wait, hold on. I can make it way
Richard
better
Allen's
quality.
car
So let's
thing?
watch it one more time.
that's Brad Weber's, right?
Okay, the
mhm.
Subaru.
No, it's a van.
It's an Econoline Ford van.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
And so this is the one that's 12 hours off, right?
Mm-hmm.
How
So
do
it's
they
not.
determine? How do they determine that? The only way I could see it is if it said it was 2:44 a.m. and they just know that's not true because it's bright outside.
So that is one. That's one of the things, is they said that it's obviously not 2:44 in the morning. Another one was that this was at almost 2:45 when he's like hitting the private drive, and then they also attached an exhibit that was from the FBI. It was like an information sheet on him in particular, and it noted that at 2:50 his phone started pinging at his parents' house. So the timing of this van going by, him driving up the private drive and starting to ping at his parents' house would match. But I would say that there are other things to corroborate the time if it were to be disputed. But again, they put in enough for the motion to get a hearing, and then those additional things would happen at a hearing if it were to be disputed by Nick. The problem, though, that he would face there, so the argument with this particular issue is that when Nick was on direct examination with Brad Weber, and he says that he clocked out at 2:02 and was home by 2:25, 2:30, right?
Right.
The defense is arguing that Nick should have known that this video existed along with the FBI like information sheet that said what time he started pinging at his house, and that if that was so, that Nick was aware of both of these pieces of evidence that he turned over to the defense, then he knowingly allowed Brad Weber to basically tell the
Commit
jury that he would have been going down there closer to when it correlated with Libby's cell phone data.
Commit perjury.
Yeah. So now he could come back and say, I wasn't aware of that. I think that would be a difficult argument to make when he's the one that turned it over to the defense. That's how they got it. But part of the argument, there's a couple here, but part of it is that it wasn't on the defense to then show the jury this video. First of all, one of the things I do want to say is they were very limited in their cross-examination. And then when they went to do their direct examination on their case in chief with Weber, they were limited there also in the sense that, like, one of the people they were going to call to impeach him was this Agent Pohl, and they weren't allowed to call him because he couldn't do virtually, blah, 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 which I think is probably another issue that's going to come up.
I think I'm wondering if they didn't get it admitted because they couldn't prove what time it was.
Well, I think that the defense,
Right.
well, so the thinking on that would then be that it was up to the defense to correct the incorrect testimony, and it's not. It's the prosecutor. The prosecutor literally can't sit there, and it's funny because were it me, but I'm not a lawyer, I would have been citing that new order, that recent order by the judge about the Delphi chief, Lamar. I'm assuming that's how you say it. Where Nick had him on the stand and was asking him questions that he was then answering that were totally contradictory to what the body cam footage showed, and the judge called that out in his order. And it was a bench trial, and actually he was found not guilty on like a plethora of things because of the, I don't want to say lies. I mean, that is what I mean, but basically because he lied on the stand and was allowed to, and Nick allowed him. So the prosecutor, that is their responsibility to have corrected that. So their argument is that Nick should have known specifically what time Weber would have been driving down, because Nick had this information because he turned it over in discovery, and therefore it was his responsibility to correct that on the stand in front of the jury, especially when he told them. So what it says here is that, and just like as a helpful thing, if you get lost in the evidence that they're putting in, the argument is typically like the first and last paragraph of each section. So they say, to obtain Mr. Allen's convictions, the state explicitly relied on Mr. Weber's testimony about the time he arrived home, and they used that testimony to corroborate Dr. Walla's rendition of Mr. Allen's statement that he became scared after he saw a van, so he took the girls to the north side of Deer Creek and killed them. Now, I've heard people say that Nick didn't actually say that he left it open to perhaps he saw the van from the north side of the creek. They had already crossed the creek. But even if you go and watch Jerry Holman's interviews after the trial, he also spreads that narrative that was Nick's at trial, that he was going to, I don't know what I can say here, if I can say words. I know people
have his way with them.
Yeah, under the bridge, and that when he saw the van, he got scared and he made them cross the creek, where he then killed them. I mean, that is their theory.
Regardless of whether Nick McClelland knew that or not, it seems like perjury, if you could prove perjury, right, this seems like pretty good grounds for a new trial.
Yeah, so basically what they say is that was the only statement allegedly made by Richard Allen that contained any detail of the murder that might be true. The state therefore cannot show Mr. Weber's uncorrected, false testimony about the time he arrived home did not have an effect on the outcome of the trial. So they're saying if that would have been if Nick would have presented the correct testimony and shown that he arrived home at 2:50 and that he was driving down the road at 2:45, that the jury would have then considered that and said, well, at that point, the phone had already stopped moving for 12 plus minutes, and therefore he couldn't have been scared. It would have contradicted the confession that was necessary. I mean, one of the things she said was, this particular juror said was important, was the van.
I'd like to see that whole footage. 2 hours before, 2 hours after. I'd watch every bit of it. See who else
I think
was
they
out there.
specifically included like only, I mean, I don't think they included it to the judge, but I know they said it in the motion that they reviewed the footage from like 2 to 4, and they specifically said that no other van was seen going down the private drive. But I would personally would be willing to review it like you, to be able to see who was driving around and when, you know, whether they went down the private drive or not. So,
Right. And I remember like Rick's like jailhouse footage. They didn't get it presented like the first time they tried to because there was no date and timestamp on it. But the judge allowed them to go back and guess the month based off of other activities within there that was documented, you know? And then she allowed them to present it. Well, you could do the same thing with that. You could base what time it was to a certain degree off of the other things that happened in that video.
Correct. Exactly.
Which sounds like what they did when they got that 12-hour number.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering how you can have a photo of allegedly Richard Allen's, what was it, a Ford Focus?
Mm-hmm.
But yet you can't have a video of this other van?
And it wasn't even it wasn't like the raw footage of that Who's Your Harvest Store footage. And basically all the witnesses themselves are the ones that identified their cars. It's a little different with this because I mean, I'm not usually the one that can see things like this, but to me it was very clearly a white van with windows. And if you look at it side by side, like with Weber's actual van, it's obviously the same thing, which I don't really know that anybody's disputing. But basically their argument to the judge, which we know that this is going to be denied, but basically their argument to the judge is either Nick knew that this footage existed, and also like the FBI the FBI sheet about Weber saying that he basically started peeing at 2:50, which bolsters the 2:44 van being him, and that's the correct time. And he didn't present that, and yet allowed the jury to believe that Weber was driving down there at 2:25, 2:30. Well, probably closer to 2:25. It would have had to been. Which would have been perfect timing for him to be scared from under the bridge and then force the girls to cross the creek and then kill them, and the phone end up under Abby's body where it never moved again, starting at 2:32, right? So he either knew and he let him do that and he didn't present the correct evidence, or if Nick says that he didn't know about this and therefore couldn't have corrected it, then at that point, it's then considered newly discovered evidence, because if the state didn't know about it, if they're claiming they didn't know about it, then how could the defense have known about it?
Wasn't that funny that Gray Hughes said that he always thought that they were across the creek when the van came down or whatever? I was like, oh, really? Always? That's what you always thought?
And also, even if you always did think that, it literally doesn't matter, because that's not what the prosecutor said happened. Like, you could think that. You could say, this makes more sense. Why didn't he say this? But that doesn't change that he actually said that.
Someone would make a compilation video of how many times that dude's
saying the other thing.
He takes down
just
the videos.
all the above.
Like, he'll go in and he'll take down all the videos that say that.
He used to be the person who put everybody's face up on there. Now he says he didn't do that. I remember that from way back in the day.
I have to say, I was in the chat the other day, and I'm used to kind of going. First of all, every time I've showed up in Gray's chat, like I've been muted or whatever. I want to say timed out, but like for the remainder of the day, I can't type. So I usually immediately when I say something, people start saying mean things, I get timed out, and then I just leave. But I was in there the other day, and I guess when the motion dropped, and people were more willing to talk about it. But generally, I don't like make it a habit of. I try to hear other arguments. But again, when it comes to this particular argument, I think it was quite clear in the opening, throughout the trial, and then in the closing that what the state was putting in front of the jury was that, and even after the verdict, because like I said, Holman's done interviews and said the exact same thing, that what he was telling the jury happened and what the evidence showed was that he was scared from the south side of the creek, south side of the bridge, whichever. And once he became scared, he crossed the creek. And if you're as a prosecutor using Libby's phone data as evidence to corroborate that story, then you pull in this footage of the van at 2:44. It simply can't be so. You can't then say that, oh, well, he was scared from the other side of the creek. It startled him, but then he stuck around for another hour, and then took the main road home.
Right. And maybe I would like to know whose footage that is. Where did it say where that came from?
It did. There's an address. It's. I don't remember the address.
And like, what if that person said, "Yeah, I was just being lazy and I set it to my iPhone, but I didn't change the AM PM, so I know it's exactly 12 hours off."
And they could have said, "I didn't know how to do it. When I turned it on, it was right, but I didn't know how to change it to AM or PM." Or maybe they said, "I don't know military time."
Okay. Well, in military time, right. Okay. Yeah, there's no AM PM. Oh, the other thing was the audio jack, right? I don't know if we discussed that. I know that was mentioned, though.
Mm-hmm. That was the final thing. And I think that was mainly just, I think in my opinion, I think that's likely to go, the argument that's likely to go seems like it would be more effective to bring up ineffective assistance with that. Because if they called Cecil, that's the right one, right? I get the two confused. Not the blood guy, the phone guy.
Right.
If they called him and he was on direct and he did a Google thing on the break and then gave that information, you could argue that they then should have recalled Stacy to explain. But I don't know what kind of leniency there is when it comes to, well, if she was coming from a different state and they had released her from the subpoena, maybe she already left to go catch a flight to go home and it was not possible to bring her back. Or how much research would she need to do on this brand new claim in order to effectively testify to it and be cross-examined on it, rather than just jump and say, well, I know we read that on a Google thing, but then I also researched this really quickly and now we're just flying by the seat of our pants instead of being very informed about what we're saying.
Right.
She basically retestified in an affidavit. And here's the other thing that's interesting about the affidavit about this motion specifically. So that affidavit that says various things, that there's no evidence that the phone got wet or that there was damage in there was nothing in it, all the things. If Nick doesn't respond or Gall denies it without a hearing, then it'll go to the appellate court and the things in those affidavits will be considered to be true by the appellate court.
Okay, so the appellate court will assume that it could have been water that got in there. Is that what you're saying?
No, the appellate court will take everything in her affidavit as true, meaning when they're trying to determine whether it was dirt and water, and she's saying that there was no evidence that there was dirt and water in the phone, well, then that no longer becomes an explanation that it's dirt and water.
Okay, I think maybe a bigger issue is how did Nick McClelland not know about that the audio jack was the audio port was accessed?
So they did. Well,
But
to a
if they,
degree.
oh yeah, to what degree?
But he said that they said, including Cecil, when he testified, he said he was aware of that data for years, for all these years. He was aware of that data, but he did not know what it meant.
Exactly. And it makes me wonder if they knew that someone had accessed the audio port, would they have charged him?
I mean, maybe I would say that if they were willing to then dismiss it with like a quick Google search and to an Apple forum, which I don't even think it was clear whether it was like an Apple tech or it was someone just saying like, hey, this one time I got dirt in my phone port and it said that my headphones were plugged in and they weren't. How do I fix it? You know, I don't think it was clear, which it was. I think they probably still would have. You have to really think when they charged him, what
The
did
dude
they
wouldn't
really?
the dude wouldn't have had to rush out into the hallway and Google search it if they knew exactly what that meant. I think they
Yeah.
had the data, but they didn't know what it meant. And
That's
so,
what they said.
yeah.
Yes. But if it was that easy to find out what it meant was to just search it in Google, then I don't know what the excuse would be for not knowing. You know, the phone stuff really bothers me in the sense that, like, they ran all these. There's many things that bother me, like not knowing when it actually turned off. That bothers me, and that was human error that stopped that from being discovered. That bothers me. But you know, they ran all these downloads of the phone. They had all these extractions, multiple, like 3+, and they were under the impression all this time that the phone died at a certain amount of time on the 13th. And it wasn't until it was brought up in a motion about those 4:33 a.m. text messages coming through, when all of a sudden we go back and look at the data again after years, and now we're saying that it didn't die. It was on until some point after it received all of those messages, and then it died, but we still don't know exactly what time it died. It just feels very much like I'm going to take another look at the data. Same with Cicero. You know, you're giving me information of a claim that's being made by the defense. So instead of me figuring out what the data actually means, I'm now going in to try to explain why it's not that. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, everybody.
Howdy, T.
Hi.
Thanks for dropping me
Hello.
a line.
I
Yeah,
thought I
thanks for
lost my
coming on.
coconut water.
Oh no, God forbid.
Oh man, this would be a bad night.
It would be. So, Dan, can you
Dr.
manage this
Mama.
for a minute so I can put my daughter to bed real quick?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Bop you down to the bottom.
What do you think, Teresa?
Also, about anything in particular or just in general?
Anything you
All the
like.
things.
We might be here for a while if we want to go in general.
Whatever you like.
Well, so the biggest thing for me, like, and I was just talking in the chat about this too, is, you know, I asked some of these questions last night with Michael Osbrook about, you know, why wouldn't they bring this up here, or why is it important legally for these things to happen now? And for me, I think that the biggest takeaway is the first point on the fact that Kathy had hired an attorney and that they knew that Rick Allen had an attorney and didn't bother to let them know about the hearing. So I think that's a huge point that I think people are missing. I also
Serve Rick either.
Or serve Rick if they thought he didn't have an attorney for the safekeeping hearing. And DB's not up here anymore, I take it, because I had to go for dinner, so I just got back. But you know, he keeps making a really good point to everybody, and I think that it needs to be reiterated, is that these are legal points. These aren't necessarily Ron Logan is guilty, Ron Logan is the right guy, the defense is solving the case. And I think a lot of people who are very pro Richard Allen is guilty are thinking like it's a grasping at straws kind of thing, like, oh, like, look, now we're going to blame, Ron Logan, or maybe it was.
And we're
Odin.
ditching the Odinism stuff, and I'm here to tell you it's not ditched. Like, it's going to be brought back up. Like, just because they wrote it here doesn't mean they've poo-pooed it forever.
Well, also we know that they were searching Ron Logan's house for items related to Odinism, so let's not just ignore that.
I do believe that got in the 3-day hearings, did it not? Nicole, whatever's deposition where she said that is also on the record, or in the record.
Right. So I think that people have to realize that these are legal arguments at this point, and I think people want to go back to how they've looked at the case for 7 years of digging through social media to try to find suspects or whatnot. Well, we're not really in that phase anymore. This is literally about the legal basis for appeals. This is the legal basis for motions to correct errors. This all has to do with the legal side of things. So because the defense puts out this motion to correct error, and it includes things about Ron Logan, the important piece that comes from that is the box cutter. So the box cutter confession, so they asked for Reese Davis, however the hell you say his name, to come and testify at the trial, along with James Haas, along with James Chadwell,
Keegan Klein.
Keegan Klein, all the people who had actually confessed or heard Ron Logan's confession. They all had to do with the false confessions type of thing. Like, if the jury's going to believe, who would ever confess to this crime if they didn't actually do it? And it's like, okay, well, here you have 4 people who are saying that, they had confessions, and you can't really give it more weight one way or the other. Like, you have to either take them all with a grain of salt, or you have to take them all seriously, and they all did it. So they were asking for him to come for that specific reason. Well, now this is important because of the box cutter. The box cutter was not part of the record until trial. So I think that people have to kind of understand that that's the legal basis behind the box cutter, and why this information is important post-trial versus at the 3-day hearing or anything along those lines.
Sleuthie, I have a vague recollection that 3-day hearing in August, beginning August, was there not reference to a box cutter at that hearing? Because didn't they ask something along the lines of,
it was said that
Richard
Allen made a comment about it being a box cutter, but other than that, there was no confirmation. There was no pathologist that testified and said that.
Could it have been a box cutter come from? Why that's stuck in my head of one of those hearings.
It was there when they were.
Okay.
They were
and that
implying
was like a forensic examiner or something they were asking.
I think it was Perlmutter, was it not?
I don't think Perlmutter, because Perlmutter was like the Odin person. Or maybe it was. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But see, I asked not as a criticism. Yeah, not as a criticism, but as like her saying yes and entertaining that could have been another avenue to open the door too. And I was confused why they didn't attack at that, or if they did.
Because up till that point, like even in the 3-day hearing, up until trial, it was said to have been 2 weapons, one serrated and one non-serrated.
Sharp, yeah.
So the box cutter, specifically the box cutter detail, did not become relevant until it came out of Core's mouth at trial. So at that point, the only person that had said it was Richard Allen, but it wasn't corroborated by actual evidence until Core put it forward as though that was possibly the murder weapon.
Correct. At trial.
Right. So once she did that, there's no other way to get in this specific thing that Ron said, unless you're going to let Reese come testify. But if she's not allowing him to come in, then there's no other way to do it. They can't just enter it.
Reese's peanut butter cup, or
yeah, supposedly that's how you say it. I don't know. I've seen a lot of Richies and they spell it like that. So
Christina, shout out Black Snake Moan. Love that movie.
No, I get that it's not. Maybe what you're saying, Teresa, is it's not really about whether Ron Logan is or isn't guilty. It's about whether or not they should have been able to present it. Is what I think you're saying. And like, I was just interested as why they chose that one particular suspect over others. maybe you have to keep these filings very brief, but I thought, why did they choose that one? Was it because of the box cutter? But also, it must be because they didn't see tangible evidence of where he was at.
So yes,
There, right?
well, it was because of the box cutter. Also, there are a lot of details already in the record about the other people.
I wondered
I
if
think,
the
I
nexus
think
for
that you
Ron
have to,
Logan. Oh, sorry.
you have to. Sorry, Dan. You have to note
Yeah.
that the motion to correct error is literally only for things at trial that they need corrected for the record.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he brings up a box cutter now makes all of that has to do with the Ron Logan saying box cutter relevant and should have been on the record for the jury to hear.
Well, that's what I had brought up to Sleuthie earlier. Is the trial people that were there, did they start hammering at that? But that's where it falls out, where the guy couldn't come in. Could he not come in because she struck him to where they didn't lay foundation,
Okay,
or
no.
she didn't allow the door to be open when they opened it? Like that part, that's the gap in my knowledge of
Well,
not
and
being
that
able to
wouldn't
watch
be
the trial.
that wouldn't be allowed to also that wouldn't be allowed to be addressed like out loud in front of the jury. So they would have had to say in a
Okay.
sidebar where no one
That's
could
the white
hear.
noise box.
Correct. That
Okay.
Ron Logan made a comment, like, so let's say they had all of this information already. They would have had to said to her in a sidebar, we have this Reese Davis, and he could testify to Ron Logan saying that, in 2017, a couple months after the murders, that he used a box cutter to kill the girls. This is now relevant because we're being told for the first time ever that a box cutter could have been used, and that would have been consistent with at least one of their wounds. And so now it's relevant. And if she said to them, well, that's not enough of, I'm just using this as an example because we don't know, but if she said that's not enough of a nexus, just one thing, and she said no, well, then their hands are tied. They can't say to, let's say Core, they can't say to him, did you know that Ron Logan said in 2017, you know what I mean? Because it's just going to be another objection, and she's obviously going to agree with that. And then they're going to piss her off and then
Right.
piss the jury off probably.
So therefore, if it was excluded, I don't see how now that's a correction of the record.
Because it should have been let in.
That's why I
Because it
wondered.
was. Because the argument is that it should have been let in. Because.
Right. I get that part, but I thought she was saying it's not. It was more about like correcting the record of what was presented.
Well, because he never had. There's no findings from Core that actually say that.
He didn't do a supplemental report saying
it was
that.
him going into his garage and just saying, hey, yeah, I saw this box cutter, and yeah, maybe it was this. And then he goes and talks to the prosecution about it multiple times, which isn't known until trial.
And let me just say, so his testimony saying that he was in his garage and looked at a box cutter, that would be in the record. But the appellate attorneys don't have anything to connect it to if this motion doesn't get filed and they connect it to Ron Logan saying that. Does that make sense? They're not going to be looking through, to see if anybody mentioned it before. They're only doing things on the record.
Also, hello, T.
That's a massive problem for Gull if that's the case. Like that is something that could get your.
Well, discretion goes such a long way, like a way long way.
She doesn't have to do anything.
Well, I mean, she's not going to get sanctioned, but it can get the case overthrown. Like that, it definitely can.
You have to comment on the fact that she's probably not even going to hold a hearing for this.
No, she's going to deny it. It's on the record though. That's good.
Right, which is the
set up a record. And actually, like, I don't want to say this, but I am. Check out Murder Sheets. Check out the interviews they've done. And honestly, past that, check out what they haven't done for Delphi. They have a lot of good stuff out there.
And I think in terms of their arguments here, if there were one that I think would be most likely to be sent back for a new trial, would likely be the safekeeping thing, which has nothing to do with any third-party person or anything like that. It's simply legal arguments because legal procedure, how it's supposed to happen, didn't happen. And so, for instance, if the appellate court, so she denies this without a hearing, and this information goes to the appellate court, they now have the receipts that the attorney was paid. They have the email and the letter that was sent to McClellan. They have the affidavit from the attorney saying that he spoke to McClellan on the phone and was told A, B, and C. All that stuff is now in the record for the appellate court to consider. And what they would do is, and Michael said this last night, that in terms of decisions that appeals courts can make, this is really easy in the sense that if they remand it for a new trial, say they vacate his conviction and they say, now because of this, it's structural error, you have to go back to trial, do it all over again. It's not the judge's fault. It's not the prosecutor's fault. It's not it's the sheriff's fault and Diener's fault. Two people that had like nothing to do with the actual trial, if that makes sense. It would all fall on Diener and the sheriff who requested the safekeeping.
Yeah, I heard Osbrook say that on Teresa's channel. It's
Yeah.
like an automatic grounds for a retrial. But I just didn't want to get my hopes up. I thought maybe that's not quite that simple because maybe they have to decide that it actually affected the outcome of the trial.
Nope.
And where they say, well, I don't think it would or something. I don't know.
Yeah, not for
harmless error.
Yeah, I specifically asked him about that, and he said that they wouldn't even consider whether it would be a different outcome. It's not even taken into consideration. It's simply, was it done the way that it was supposed to? And if the answer is no, then you send it back. And it won't, despite what Onion says, it would not then mean that everything that happened after that is irrelevant. Like all the confessions would get thrown out and all that shit. It has literally nothing to do with any of that. Did you hear that, Teresa? Were you here when she played that clip?
I was. That's I think I just come back and that's when I was like, bleh. But
the news clip.
Yeah, where Onion was like, I mean, I guess it makes sense for them to do that because then they would be able to get like all the confessions out because everything that happened after the safekeeping.
Tree. So this is what we talked about last night, and so and Osbrook even said too.
Oh,
like,
Onion, I'm sorry. Gotcha.
You didn't know
and
I call her something else that's a lot more rude. I won't say it on here.
Anal?
It's another word for yes. Anal and Kevon.
Oh shit! But I don't even know what I was saying now. I'm done.
I want the chat to know that I got T to say anal.
It wasn't hard. I knew she would offer
on
that
the
up
record.
If
I would do it. I would totally do it.
Yeah, that loud Sleuthie says she'll offer it up. It's not hard.
Oh, here we go.
So bad. So bad. It's just the tip, Dan. Just the tip.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've been biting my tongue the whole time.
That put us on like a whole ass, like 20-minute derail. I couldn't figure out how to explain it without saying it again. You would make people paranoid.
Well, Sleuthie was explaining how you deal with just the tip, and then and how you go down after that.
I'm taking notes.
Anyway, I don't even know what I was saying.
You were saying that Michael brought that up about.
Oh no, I had asked him about that, and he was like, "No, it's two different things." And I was like, "Well, is it two different things? Because if you throw out the safekeeping order and he never should have ever been sent there, then doesn't that alter the fact that he wouldn't have been in the prison making these confessions to these people?"
No, because he could have been, but there was a proper way to do it.
His point, that was his point. So yes. So that's essentially what he said. And he also said that being in solitary and the treatment that he had in solitary wasn't necessarily due to the safekeeping order, because once you go through
the self-deleting thing, the protective part.
Once you go through where do they evaluate
the motion that requested the safekeeping didn't specifically request that he go to Westville in segregation.
Right. So he was saying like, no, it probably would not actually have anything to do with like Fruit of the Poisonous Tree, because the solitary and his conditions were based off of the evaluation stage when he was sent to the DOC. And I was like, well, if he wasn't sent to the DOC, you never would have been evaluated. And I was kind of the one pushing the whole, like, there's a whole process here. You could argue Fruit of the Poisonous Tree. And he was like, he didn't really see it. But
So
I was like, I see
the way that he explained it though is, and I think it's confusing. It's not confusing for him because he's thinking about it separately than what we're thinking, because they did go into detail about how like he was sent to this basically torture and it made him psychotic and this and that. And we're still equating that to like, well, if he never would have went there, then he never would have been psychotic and he never would have made those statements. But really his argument is basically, in mentioning all those things, it's in order to clarify or define or show that that whole safekeeping proceeding / situation was a critical stage.
Right.
And the reason it was a critical stage is because of how it affected the defendant. So if you're looking at, well, he wasn't at sentencing, or he didn't have an attorney at sentencing, so he missed a critical stage in his whatever. And that's an error because maybe his sentencing would have went differently. He wouldn't have got as long if he had someone there to argue for him. It's easier to see that that was a critical stage proceeding. But when you're talking about something like a safekeeping proceeding that doesn't require a hearing, you have to then look at what the consequences were for the defendant. And the consequences don't necessarily go like they would have never happened if the safekeeping thing didn't happen the way that it did, because it very well could have.
Right. I'm afraid they might say, well, even if his lawyer was present, he ended up in the same place. There was no other option. So therefore, nothing violent. It wasn't really that crucial or of a time in the case. You see, like that. You know?
Well, that's not their consideration.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
The problem is that we don't know the legal standings or the legal argument that an attorney would have made. And if you go with just what the basic, Indiana code is that the safekeeping order essentially just said Rick Allen, they can't keep Rick Allen, it's his safety, essentially. They can't keep him safe. And if you go with the Indiana code, the detainee or the inmate is the one who has the right to control their own safety. So if they choose to go because they're, we want to stay safe, I'll go. But they also have the right to deny it. Like, no, I don't want to go. I'm fine.
If the only reason for it is their personal safety, which is what
Correct.
he said. But essentially, the argument goes even further than that in the sense, and I thought it was a really good argument before this motion even came out, and I think we talked about it on Teresa's channel with Michael, that basically when they moved him to White County, in order to have made that decision to move him, Lesenby should have gotten the safekeeping order. But instead, he moved him. And at that point, it was no longer, this is his argument, is that it was no longer his responsibility, or he had no standing is the word, but I'm trying to think of a better one. But he Lesenby had no standing to ask for a prisoner that wasn't in his care and custody to be moved someplace. Once he put him in White County, that became the White County Sheriff's responsibility to ask. Because you can't as a sheriff at, County A, move an inmate to County B, and then one day say, I think he's probably not safe here in County A, so I'm going to ask for him to be moved from County B to DOC. It doesn't make any sense. It would have to be whoever is currently in like possession of him. Mm-hmm. And also a judge in that jurisdiction, which Diener was not. Diener is not a judge in White County. So
if he was in the possession of Carroll County, for example, and Tobe Lesenby said that we don't have the place to house him, we just don't have it, would that have changed with a lawyer or without? I'm afraid it'll go that way.
Well, he went to Carroll County from the 26th to the 28th. Yes. And then the 28th to the 3rd, he was in White County. The decision was made on the 3rd. So the whole thing is how does he go from Carroll County the 26th through the 28th and then be moved to White County without anybody knowing anything about it?
Without a safekeeping.
He gets moved to White County under the radar.
What date did he get charged? The 26th, the 28th.
28.
28.
So you can hold.
Charged with it. 26 is when he's cuffed and put in arrested and read his
You,
Miranda.
right, and you can hold somebody for what, like 72 hours. So maybe the
Hours.
fact that he wasn't charged yet, and people didn't know. But once you're charged with it, the word would have gotten out. I don't know.
Well, he was charged under a pseudonym because even the lawyer didn't know. The lawyer called the jail to like set up a meeting with Richard Allen, and they didn't have Richard Allen. They're like, we don't have a Richard Allen here. So that's when he called McClellan and was like, I called the jail and they said that they don't have Richard Allen in the jail. Where is he? And McClellan told him that they had booked him under a pseudonym, which still is bizarre to me because the pseudonym was not like a pseudonym. It was somebody's actual real name. That was not him.
Somebody
So
who kept getting arrested.
Yeah, that's weird. And so,
what's that town?
I didn't hear it.
Monticello? Where that dude was from? Greg Renfro.
Greg Renfro.
I thought it was Monticello or something where he was from.
Well, regardless, it's an odd name and it belongs to someone else. Like, you book him under John Doe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or have a designated name for situations such as this that isn't someone else's name. But regardless, you know, he makes multiple arguments in this. That's just one of them. Another one of them.
I need to clarify something really quick though before you keep going, Sleuthie, because we're talking about the 26th and the 28th, but at the end of trial, I think it's Rosie who asked the judge to have the record reflect that he was actually arrested on the 26th and not on the 28th.
Yes.
So that's going to be that's also now on the record that his official arrest date being the 26th versus the 28th.
And without a warrant.
But I don't know if you I don't know how to define it between arrested and detained versus like having a charge, because they can hold you for 3 days. So maybe they just charge. Huh?
2. I think it's only 48 hours in Indiana. Yeah, so they booked and charged, but they asked her to have the record reflect that he was actually arrested on the 26th.
Right, and I don't think that Tobe Lesenby could request some sort of transfer during that time if he hasn't even charged the person.
Correct. Well, and that's the issue with the whole. Well, if he had a lawyer, why didn't he file an appearance? Well, he didn't file an appearance because he was hired before he was actually charged. There was nowhere to enter an appearance. There was no docket. There was no place for him to enter such a thing. So instead, he let the sheriff, who had access to Richard Allen, know, and the prosecutor, who was litigating it, know that he was representing Richard Allen. Don't talk to him. Talk to me until he can enter the appearance. And that didn't happen. But on top of it, like you said about moving him while he's not been charged, I think regardless, we can't just move prisoner like they have to explain to a judge why they need to be moved, and that leads into their next argument, which was that
so this is also an important piece because we don't have the transcript yet of the October 28th 2022 initial hearing, which we do have coming, but we don't have it yet.
Yeah, well, regardless, you do have Lesenby's testimony on the stand at a hearing, saying that he had never written one of these motions before and that he had Diener do it. And then he signed it. And so the problem with that is that then now they've had ex parte communications. Diener's not supposed to write motions for anybody. I think they said besides family, which personally I think they probably shouldn't be doing that anyway, but they're allowed to.
Right.
You know, why he didn't go to the prosecutor, I have no idea, but he had Diener do it, and Diener wrote it, had him sign it, and then Diener signed off on it and granted it, and then recused himself when he should have recused himself before any of that.
So Diener helps Lesenby write the motion for safekeeping, approves his own motion that he just wrote, and then recuses himself the same day.
It's almost like he knew he probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, let's get this guy the hell out of here and I quit.
Hashtag depose Diener. I'm like, if he's not a judge anymore, I don't see why he can't be deposed. But you know, that's the other argument is Diener violated rules. Like, so he didn't have any jurisdiction to grant that motion in the first place. And he violated rules by writing it for Lesenby. And he violated rules by having ex parte communication with Lesenby about the defendant. And then Lesenby admittedly didn't know anything about doing this, and therefore didn't serve anybody with the motion. I guess Diener forgot to tell him he had to do that. So he didn't serve Richard Allen and he didn't serve the attorney. So there was no opportunity for either the attorney or Richard Allen to say, well, if I'm being moved because of my personal safety, I would politely decline, which he's allowed to do. Or have the attorney, because Richard Allen wouldn't know this, but have the attorney argue that it has to be the White County sheriff and a judge in White County to ask for the safekeeping and not Diener and Lesenby. So you're just basically talking about legal error. You're not talking about any of the consequences that came after that, but it is mentioned in order to show that it was a critical stage. Because it did have bad outcomes, but they're not, the appellate court is not going to say, well, even if the White County judge and White County sheriff had been the ones to do the safekeeping, he still would have ended up in Westville in solitary confinement. Oh, that's a twist.
Well, I feel like if it's so clear cut that it was going to get thrown out or it was going to get a new trial, wouldn't Goal have dismissed it? Wouldn't she? I mean, she knew all that, right? So something tells me it's not quite so clear cut, and I don't know. I guess like I'm jaded because this whole thing is going wrong, and I just don't. I think somehow they'll get around it. It's not that I think this will happen. I'm just, you know what I mean, or that it should happen. I'm just kind of like devil's advocate because that's been the case so far, in my opinion. You know.
So I don't know that they've made these particular arguments to her specifically. Are you talking about she's ruled on like their motions to amend it? Or modify it?
Well, I mean, like, yeah, she knew about this, that the safekeeping order had been violated originally, right? I mean, was she the judge there?
No, she thinks that the defense team lied about all of it.
Mm-hmm.
She thinks the defense team lied about the lawyer part?
She didn't exist whenever the safekeeping order and all that stuff was happening. So unless they brought that argument,
Diener accused himself.
Yeah. So unless that argument was brought to her specifically about all of this, then she wouldn't have known. Now, one of the things is that they did not get this affidavit from Kathy. They did not hear from this attorney and get an affidavit from him until January 19th or whatever of this year.
Right. And
so they needed all those things.
And was Goal on the case at that time? Could they have brought it to her then? And if she thought it was so compelling, wouldn't she dismiss it?
They did in the motion to correct error. So I don't think she's going to, Sterling, but yes, she could. This is her opportunity to look at this motion to correct error. And let's say she says, I don't believe a single thing of the other things that you all said, and I don't care about it at all. But this is an error, and I don't want the appellate court to overturn this because of this error. And so, unfortunately, because the error was made, then yeah, we have to vacate the conviction and do a new trial. She can make that decision. She won't, but she can. If she doesn't, then it will go to the appellate court. And again, in terms of decisions that they have to make, I would imagine they're not very excited to overturn judges.
You said they learned in January of 24 or 25?
Oh, 25, I meant. Sorry. I'm still living in last year. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she didn't know about it till they filed that.
Okay.
So, but it is in front of her for consideration right now.
Okay. And remind me what date the verdict came out?
November
11th.
It was
Veterans Day.
Oh, it was Veterans Day. You're right.
Okay. So maybe, is that the newly discovered evidence?
Well, they did get this information, like I said, in January. So while all the other stuff might not be new, they might have already known about it. yes, technically, the affidavit and the receipt for the $5,000 and all of that stuff is new to them. They just obtained it.
If you're the defense, Andrew Baldwin and Rosie, how do you not know that Kathy paid $5,000 and retained a lawyer?
Well, think
Good question.
it is a good question. And if you think about this, you do have to wonder why they multiple times tried to get the safekeeping order modified or stopped. But at the same time, it's like, are you focused on just getting him like out of there? Like, I don't know. I feel like at some point when they started making all those arguments about the safekeeping, that it was more an argument that he was unsafe and like not mentally sane, rather than, I mean, they were
Brad kind
planning
of
to
touches
file.
on it a little bit, but he doesn't go into the actual safekeeping. But he did say in that interview, you know, that looking back on it now, like they would have done a bunch of stuff different, but they just thought like, oh, okay, like this is happening. We see all this is happening. We're just going to get the judge to move him and everything's going to be okay and he'll be back to normal and all will be fine. You know? And
If
so
if
I think
if
that
they would
looking
have,
back on it, they probably would have done something different when it came to like the safekeeping hearing in June.
yeah, but what would have been the outcome? She would have just signed a new one. I mean, there's no new trial to get.
No, I
She's
think
not
that
going
they
to
just thought they
dismiss
were going to get him
charges.
moved. They just thought like, okay, she'll just move him because she's going to see that all this crazy shit's happening, and then we'll get rid of the safekeeping and none of it's going to matter. You see what I mean?
Well, it's
They were
confusing.
talking about two different things, Sterling. Sorry, I
Well,
apologize.
she could declare a
I
mistrial. She could
I
declare a
agree with
mistrial,
Teacher.
and
Not if a
that would
trial didn't happen yet.
no. But like when Baldwin and Rosie brought it up to her that this had happened, if she was so concerned about it, she would have declared a mistrial right there, and then McClellan maybe like could have brought it up for a retrial if he wanted to, right? So, or either that, or like Baldwin and Rosie didn't know, which I don't believe
that
that.
was my big question too. So that's why I said I think I'm talking about something different than you. But that was my big question too: is why is this retainer for this attorney now, you know, coming out now? But also, I think it also comes to the path of attorneys. So you're talking about trial attorneys versus appellate attorneys versus, you know, a Michael Osbrook habeas attorney, and just their different knowledge of the different laws. That's the only thing I can surmise it to, and that's just my opinion. Because I had the same question. I'm like, why didn't anybody say, hey, this guy had a fucking attorney back in, you know, November of 2022, and nobody told the attorney?
And they think differently, the different attorneys. And so it's entirely possible that once appellate attorneys got on board, they said, we're starting to look and we're looking back at the very beginning and there's all these
Right.
issues with the safekeeping. Why did you never say anything? And so now there's like a rush to the only way to get it on the record, meaning the only way to get the receipts on the record, which you need, the only way to get the attorney's emails to the sheriff and the prosecutor on the record so that the appellate attorneys can argue this, is for them to file this motion to correct error.
So, but I don't have a good answer to your question because I have the same question. So I just kind of came up with my own thought process on what the answer might be. I'm
just thinking it through.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking it through too. Yeah.
I do think they think differently. Like, I think you're probably right. That's probably got a lot to do with it, is that it was an argument they hadn't considered because they don't typically make those arguments.
But like, if it's so clear cut that automatic retrial, Michael Osbrook knows that. I just think that they would have known that, and they would have approached go with it, and it would have been dismissed. But I'm
he's
just
a
afraid
habeas
if they all think differently, I'm afraid so will the appellate court, and they're gonna think differently about whether it was a critical stage or whatnot. I'm not convinced this is going to be a clear cut retrial.
It could be. I think it could be an automatic. They can do whatever they want at the end of the day.
No,
could be automatic.
Yeah,
it could be automatic.
Or they could ignore it and move on.
No, you're guaranteed a.
Okay, so that's interesting. Free Them All says, as an attorney, I can't disclose a representation agreement unless the client asks me to disclose it.
I do think I agree with Free Them All. And I said this before. Somebody was saying something about why did they get a affidavit from Kathy Allen and not one from Richard Allen saying that this was his attorney, Mr. Gibson, and that he had paid him. And I just thought he was literally brought into a jail, then a prison. He had just been arrested.
He hadn't not talked to Kathy. I think people need
He
to
hadn't
understand
talked to Kathy?
He had not talked to Kathy to know that Kathy put $5,000 down for Gibson.
Correct.
They weren't allowed
I don't
to
even
speak
think he
to each
knew.
other.
Well, I'm lying. I don't think he knew until Gibson went to go see him.
Correct.
In the jail, and then I'm a little fuzzy on that, because then I guess once he left,
see him, and then you have the letter, because now Gibson's saying it's going to cost you this amount of money because they're charging you with murder, 2 counts of murder, and this is how much it's going to cost, and they don't have that amount of money, so he writes the letter to the judge saying, hey, I didn't realize that this was going to cost this much, and I can't do it by myself. I need help. Have mercy on me, or whatever the hell he says.
Well, she paid him before he went down there. And then
Bill, that's a good one.
He must have had some kind of conversation with someone. I'm assuming it had to be McClelland, who would have informed him that he would then the next day be charged with murder. Like, it had to have been McClelland. And I think Kathy, when she paid him the $5,000, she thought that was like, you have to remember, like, when Kathy paid this man,
a layperson doesn't know that it costs $2 million or whatever.
But when she paid him the $5,000, she didn't know what he was going to be charged. She didn't know he was being charged with murder.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think she could assume from the interrogation, right? Because she was at the interrogation. I think she could probably assume, but nobody knows how much that shit costs. Like,
why would you?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a trial nut.
I mean, even then, I think people don't grasp, like, really how much
$2 million. Johnny Depp, God knows how much that was. Like, the Murdaugh trial, any of these are massive amounts of money.
Except I'm having a real hard time figuring out what they spent $4 million on here.
Renovating the courthouse and $600,000 on the defense, and then all the. I don't think the Wabash River search was factored into that. I think that was all went after they approved the budget or whatever. So that's on the county or state's budget.
And I wonder if that $5,000 was enough to hire him as your lawyer, right? Because maybe that was just a part of it, and he didn't agree to take the case because they didn't have the full amount. So he'll claim he was never on the case.
Right. Well, he probably said, I need $5,000 before I do anything.
Just to get started. Yep.
And then he went to go visit him, and then he found out that it was murder, and then he probably said to her, this is going to be $300,000, and I'm going to need money before we start doing stuff. And then she's like, oh my God,
did Bob say it was $25,000 or $50,000 to get started or something?
I would imagine. I mean, you wouldn't want to want to do a bunch of work and not get paid. I mean, if you can't get paid by the state, it'd be harder to get paid by people.
Mm-hmm. And then try crowdfunding for a murder person. Even you look at Karen Reed and stuff, it's difficult to even get people to look at it.
And I'm shocked. I mean, but a lot of work has gone into raising all of that money. But even then, she's, double and triple what she's raised, she has paid. So
I was just going to say, her dad and their houses, it's just, that's she's got top level attorneys too. With Alan
But
Jackson.
That's what I mean when you're talking about money. So, like, think about it this way: how is it fair? So now they're going to charge her again. They're going to try her again, and she's paying all this money. If they get another mistrial or hung jury, like, what's she going to do? Like, is she going to keep fundraising? Like, at some point, you're going to be like, listen, this has now bled me dry. I can't defend myself anymore. And then you go to trial with public defenders, and then what? After 2 mistrials, then you get found guilty? That's crazy.
I was going to bring this up earlier about the feds, like their conviction rate. People look at that and are like, oh, they're so good at their job. No, they overcharge people and drag them down in so much stuff that unless you're Elon Musk, you can't fight it. Then they offer you a plea deal, and then they get their conviction.
Duh. I mean,
to backtrack in the conversation, though, Bill made a really good point in chat too. Is if this attorney is retained during the time that he's only being detained and not charged, and then changing the arrest date to the 26th would make this attorney now more relevant than he would have been before. I'd have to talk to an attorney to see how legally if that would make sense, but
if it was originally the 28th, if it was originally written as the 28th, then him being hired on the 27th, I believe he was hired on the 27th.
Right.
Would probably be a little different, because I would say once he was charged on the 28th. Well, I don't know. You know what they might factor into it is like how far $5,000 would get you if Kathy didn't pay him any additional funds. Like maybe that would have gotten him through to 11.5, let's say, for example, but not any further than that. I mean, he wrote that letter, and one of the points that they mentioned was that he didn't say in the letter that he didn't have an attorney. He just simply said he needs a public defender because he didn't know how much it would cost. And then I think that's where they factor in that, what did he call it? The mailbox something or other, where the day that the inmate sends mail is when it's considered filed.
Right, which would be the first.
Yeah, I think that factors into it too. So,
I'm not sure if the guy was actually officially on the case, and if there wasn't even, does it have to be a matter of court record that you're on the case as their attorney before?
No charges on the 27th for him to enter an appearance or anything, though. So
there is no record yet at that point. But he did let McClelland and the sheriff both know that he was his attorney representing him, but there was no record to file an appearance on because they hadn't charged him.
But I think we also have to go back to even if he has this attorney, or let's say the attorney means nothing, that we still know that there was nothing served to the attorney, if he means something, and if the attorney means nothing time-wise, or because he's not on record, they never served Rick Allen.
Right. With the motion for safekeeping. Correct.
So he would still have been pro se at that point. But then if you go with the prison mailbox rule, he technically had asked for public defenders on November 1st.
Which is
so
still
on November 3rd, he should have still had attorneys. So somebody, whether it be Rick Allen, Gibson, or public defenders, somebody should have been notified to be able to legally argue on the behalf of Richard Allen on November 3rd.
Right.
And nobody was.
Because Lesenby didn't serve the motion to anybody. Seems like a massive oversight for Diener. Like he should have he should have known better than to involve himself with.
He should have just asked for a special judge from the get-go.
He should have said, "Don't ask me. Ask the prosecutor. That's what he's here for. Have him help you do this motion. I can't do that."
And they admit that he wasn't served, Richard Allen?
Right. So he's noticed on the actual safekeeping order, like once it's already signed off, that, hey, you're going to be transferred. But this is the wonky thing because they never actually hold a hearing. So this goes back to like ex parte communications. All these people are talking behind the scenes without Rick Allen or any representation of Rick Allen. So he has no say-so in what's happening to him when his attorneys have no way to legally fight for him and make sure he's represented in any way. So all of this is happening, but there is no safekeeping hearing on the 3rd. It's just signed off on. So whether they're doing it in court or anything like that, there's no hearing actually happening.
But the motion was signed the 2nd. So one could say there was an opportunity for somebody to be served with that motion prior to Diener signing it on the 3rd. It's not like they were just standing in the same room. I mean, I would hope they weren't standing in the same room on the 3rd and he decided to date it the 2nd. I would hope that didn't happen. But he helped him write it. He signed it on the 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
He ruled on it on the 3rd. So in theory, he should have been served, either Richard Allen or Gibson. Somebody should have been served on the 2nd, which would have given them an opportunity to request a hearing on this.
And we know for a
or
fact,
argue in a motion.
and we know that Richard Allen wasn't served.
Yes.
Okay.
And there would be a record of that because there was a docket at that point. Like by the first.
If he was served and it's just not on record anywhere, and Nick McClelland just happens to have that somewhere, that's the whole point of them being able to respond to this within 15 days to say, hey, no, here's the evidence or exhibit that shows we did serve XYZ, and these are the communications, and this is how it all went down. So they have to respond to this, and then the judge can make a decision there.
Oh, okay.
But when that would have been attached to his motion.
It should have been, yeah. But I'm just saying, like, just for shits and giggles.
Did that $5,000 lawyer ever file a notice of what do you call it?
Representation?
Yeah. No, because he requested a public defender.
I was gonna say, yeah.
No,
I think he already backed out, because if you do, they have to get permission to leave the client. They can't just dump them even without being paid. They generally let it go. I just didn't know if he had filed that or not.
Exactly.
They have to represent you, even like if the judge determines they have to represent you, even if you're not paying them. Like,
yes, but in terms of this particular issue,
no, I don't think he did. I just wondered. I didn't know.
Well, I mean, what would he do apart from maybe perhaps making this argument now, like that we're making now? Perhaps making it back then would have been appropriate. I'm not sure. I do think that to a degree that trial attorneys don't necessarily think about things like this in particular.
No, and you don't want them to either, other than preserving things for appeal.
And even then, I would say that if they had like an appellate attorney with them from start to finish, that it might be more thorough and inclusive of appellate issues and how you preserve them. But I think just the basic one, you know what I mean? Like basic ones that they manage to preserve. I think they have different brains. Just like I think that attorneys that argue to like the Supreme Court, I think that's a whole different type of attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, look who's back. What up, big dog?
Hi.
I'm excited to see Mark. I'm glad he's on.
Who?
Sterling?
Mark Lehman.
Oh my gosh, I know. How did that happen?
Great.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I thought he was great.
He was so good. Like, I thought the whole Supreme Court thing made Indiana's justice system look so good. Like, their cameras were perfect. Like, their judges were, like, very fair. Like, argued both sides. I just was, like, so impressed with that whole thing.
It was fascinating. And you don't know you don't really know what they're thinking. Because, like, okay, so they'll ask questions of, let's say, Lehman. And you're like, oh shit, like they're ripping him apart. This is fucked. They're not buying anything he's saying. And then they go to this other guy, and then he's like, wheat. And she's like, I know you want to argue wheat, but it's not. I don't care about wheat. Use something else. And it's like, oh, that was the whole thing was great. I mean, they're equally like.
Dude, Justice Rush is a badass.
I don't know. You say that, but they put Gall back on there. I feel like that's half.
Well, I don't think Mark Lehman like really made he didn't have time to like make all of the arguments, so he like went with the most pertinent one. I think if he had like more time to argue it, he probably could have. But he was just trying to get the lawyers back on because that was like the main thing. And I think.
I feel like even them, they could have just even how they cited it. They kind of knew that. Was it Shay that talked like? That's exactly what's gonna happen.
Dude, I thought he kicked butt, like honestly.
Like really think of the level of preparedness. Like, so you have to say you have 20 minutes to talk. Well, you have to prepare 20 minutes. Like you have to be prepared to speak for 20 minutes. Let's say they don't say a word. But generally, like even we saw with what did he make it a minute? If that? And then your entire speech is just gone. Now you got to answer on the fly questions. So prior to going in there, you have to create a list of all the possible questions that these people could say, the different arguments that they could try to confront you with so that you have an answer for it. Like, I think if you're looking at one side and the other, I think the other guy was clearly unprepared because the only thing he had to argue back with was wheat, which basically said a judge can do whatever the fuck they want to. And that wasn't a good argument.
And Justice Rush was like, okay, not wheat. Come up with anything else. And he's like, but wheat says, like, oh god.
But wheat.
I was talk about secondhand embarrassment. Like his whole argument was, but wheat says that a judge can do whatever they want, and so
Dude, and then
I think he's
when
disappeared.
When he was well, they're really good qualified lawyers or whatever. I was like, oh, you're
but they're
done,
also
bro.
incompetent.
You're done.
Incompetent idiots, but they're really qualified.
Yeah,
really good
like,
lawyers.
you're done, dude. You screwed yourself.
I pictured like Gold waiting like in the car to give him a thrashing. Like once he got out, she was watching it live stream. She's
hold
like,
his
"You
pants down and
motherfucker!"
spanked his bottom.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh shit, that was funny.
I don't even remember his name. I just simply remember that he couldn't argue anything but wheat.
But wheat.
Yeah, he ruined his career right there.
But my point is, they're all different attorneys. Like, I don't think that Brad Rosie could have stood there in front of all of those judges and on the fly, you know what I mean? Argued the things that they needed to hear. And that's not saying anything about either one as an attorney, but I just don't know that I think with a trial attorney, there's just so many things. I think they were like understaffed in the sense that, and I definitely think that obviously after the leak stuff happened, I think they shut it down like even further. But I don't think anybody denies like the resources of the state versus a defense. And I think they were just so limited here. And I'm not making excuses. I think that there are things that
I blame everything that happened on Gall because it's her. It was her. You know, she's the referee in the wrestling ring. Like, and she allowed shit to go. Even the shit that they did that pissed her off, she didn't admonish them for it. I think even the Supreme Court said that. They could have interdicted beforehand and probably gotten them to stop, and she did nothing, and then drops the hammer on them all the way around. Like the ball, shit rolls
it's
downhill,
a whole year,
not uphill.
Yeah, it's a whole year late. What does that say about you as a judge now that a whole year later you're sitting here and you're saying a whole last year ago I thought that you were a problem, but I didn't say anything, but I kept writing down every time you did something I didn't like, but I never stopped it. I just wrote it down so that now I've hit my, this is the straw that broke the camel's back, and you're incompetent and
it's everything.
and you need to
Cleveland.
go.
The fact that those guys couldn't communicate with each other unless it was through her, like that's all her breaking it, like her just not holding it down and doing it. Like,
you know who else deserves like a big shout out for like the whole Supreme Court thing is Kara Weineke. Like, because
of course,
like 1% of those make it to like actually be heard, and she actually like got both of hers through. Like, even though they didn't hear the one all the way, like they addressed it, and so and plus she's just like in general, she's just a very nice person, and like
she was shocked
her on her ethics though.
I'll mute you for that, Dan. You just don't talk about her like that.
She was shocked that they even considered it, let alone heard oral argument. Like I think she was fully prepared for them to just both get.
Yeah, she definitely.
Like you want to say, it's like Sterling. He's like, I want to think. Okay, so we're saying that this is clear cut, but like. We don't know what they're going to do, and they were thinking the same way. Like, this seems obvious, but they can do whatever they want.
If we can sit here and talk about Gall being Satan, I can mention ethical quandaries about Kara Weineke as well.
No, you can't. I was just giving her a shout out. It's not the time nor
the place. No, I'm just saying
we
just blasted Gall for everything.
Well, Gall deserves it. Like,
and you're right.
She's a huge difference.
She's supposed to be above them as the referee or the gatekeeper or whatever. Like, she's supposed to make sure that things
be the
go.
Trier of law.
Yeah, and I think at one point I think it was clear that the way she went about, like I said, like a year ago, you did this and it bothered me. I never said anything. Then you did. Well, what happens in normal everyday life when we do stuff like that? We end up building resentments against people. That's literally just being a human. And so now I have this resentment And now every time you talk, I'm going to paint it in this light of this resentment that I have against you. And I think it just got out of hand. I do think, I'm not saying the outcome would have been different of the trial itself, but I do think it would have been most appropriate at one point for her to just, if anything, I don't think it should have gotten that far, but at the very least, once they got put back on, I think she should have had the
She should have
foresight.
been.
The wherewithal.
She
I
should.
love it.
I did
Whenever you
not want to
said
say that. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. But she should have been able to reflect on herself enough to say, you know what? At this point, like, there's no downside to me just stepping away. Any judge literally can handle that. Could have handled this.
Yeah.
Didn't have to be her.
No, she wouldn't have been the first judge to accuse herself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're supposed to be able to do that. There's no shame in recusing. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it
Right,
wouldn't
'cause
be
the-
like she was like losing or like admitting defeat. It would have been like the
Yeah.
right thing to do for
Now
justice.
she's got
And like
control issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
she was just like, I feel like Nick McClellan was like doing lines of coke off of her. No, I'm just kidding. That's what I picture in my head, though.
This makes me want to throw up.
He's all
Yeah, I'm
brushing
just-
his hair back behind.
I'm just wondering. I just think that the appeal process will say they'll get out of it somehow. You know, I don't want to repeat myself that much, but they'll say, "Oh, the lawyer was never officially on the case because he just took $5,000 to go talk to him, and he had never, signed some sort of document with the court or something." You know,
So that could be
yeah.
so. You're probably right. I mean,
And so they didn't have to notify him for this and that reason, and I don't know. They'll.
so the good part about that is, I mean, not good, but I mean, as long as Richard Allen stays alive, the goodish part of this is that you're probably right. But once that's done, then you go into post-conviction stuff. Well, the post-conviction stuff is different because the people handling the post-conviction will get all of the discovery. They're no longer bound by simply what is in the record. They'll get all the discovery. They could do an investigation. They'll be able to subpoena stuff. They'll be able to do depositions. They'll be able to send investigators to go talk to people. They can actually be doing all of that now. And so it's a much more it's a different it's no longer like legal arguments on the record. It's now, if we were on the path of trying to investigate kind of who did it, that's where we could start going down that path. Then you
There's
have
a lot
other
of
stuff
different
too, like
facets. You also have the criminal side or the civil side where you could get a lot of the evidence and go that direction.
I think they're probably. Didn't he say they're already doing? I think he said they're already doing
He said they
like
better
the
be
civil.
doing it. Somebody better be doing it.
The civil attorneys, I think, like within this week, we're supposed to be meeting with him or whatever.
I'm just saying that there's a ton of different avenues legally they're all going to be happening kind of at the same time. And I think that people need to pay attention to each avenue as an individual. And then at the latter date, when everything kind of comes together, all of that can be used as well because it's now all part of a record.
And for what they are.
But I think that people who want to continue to cover the case have to stay away from that. Unless you're talking about post-conviction investigation stuff, which was Sleuthie was just talking about trying to like actually go figure out who did it. All of these are just different legal things that have to be done in the course of getting either to a new trial, an appeal, any of those things. So there's just different legal facets instead of saying like, oh, look at the defense doesn't know this or doesn't know that. And it's like, no, they have to do these things on purpose for the legal side.
And also, don't you think that the whole time, like the defense was kind of like putting in place those like arguments and like because they kind of like knew that goal was that I feel like they knew that the trial was going to end up like this just because like goal kept out anything that could have been like reasonable doubt. So like
to a degree.
I mean, I really think it was an injustice to not let that FBI guy testify like over Zoom. Like there was no reason for that.
She said, what is she? I'm picturing her written order. It said like that they did not meet, like they didn't meet the standard, like whatever standard they had to, or they didn't make the showing they were supposed to make or whatever. Like, ma'am, the standard they have to meet is that it's necessary. If the man has a doctor saying that he cannot get on a plane because he will die, that's a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And she still said no. But regardless, I think all trial attorneys keep in mind the fact that, and I think where it really showed was that in camera hearing when we got the transcript finally, I think it really showed the level that specifically Rosie went to make sure that
there was a record.
The record reflected. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, he's a badass. He's like, honestly, he's pretty fucking rad.
I think that he and Andy differ in the sense that I think Andy in that particular situation was so just couldn't, but like flabbergasted that had just happened. Like, I think he was to the point where I think where he left alone to make the record. And I'm not saying anything bad about Andy, but I think that he also had like a personal attachment to that whole thing that I think he was just so
he was like
stunned.
devastated. I think he was very like
Yes,
devastated.
I do too. And I think he still kind of is.
Yeah, no, but and Rozzy was a badass because he like Judge Gold didn't want them to go through the courtroom, and he like went out there and he got Cassie and whatever his mom's name is, and he was like, "Let's go," like just like a boss, you know. He was like, "Fuck that shit."
He was slightly less attached to the situation. Like, he didn't know Westerman. Like, his feelings were not hurt. Westerman was not his friend. It wasn't taken from his office. So thankfully they both were there because I don't think that, like you said, devastated is a good word. I don't think that Andy would have been able to effectively make the record as clear as Rosie did try to make the record. And for that reason. And so, there was something else that you said that I was going to comment on. I know Teresa said when she was saying about people covering this case, I also think if you're going to cover what's happening now, you should just be aware that what you're covering has nothing to do with whether Richard Allen did it or not.
Yeah, it's just like the legal arguments.
Yeah. So any argument that they say, they're not necessarily trying to prove, like, to an appellate court that Richard Allen didn't do it. You know, an appellate court's not going to say.
Well, I just think we're going to hear that a lot on social media for people who follow the case on social media. You're going to hear a lot of like, "Oh, look at, oh yeah, I thought it was this, but now it's this, and that's that."
And the whole like changing the goalposts. It's not like they're not trying to prove that anybody else did it. Like, that's not what their point is, right? That what you're
unless they just want to go with like a post-conviction investigation where they are just going to put a bunch of people on to actually try to figure out who the hell did do it.
Well, and you're likely not going to know about most of that until they go to file something. Like, you're not going to know at this point now. There is no longer, multiple filings and knowing what's happening each step of the way, an argument. Like, it's going to be one big ass filing, and then it's going to be an answer. Then it's going to be couple years later, it's going to be another big ass filing, and that's, you know what I mean? Like,
but I think that people just need to know that everything that's happening now has to do with the law, versus because I think people are so sucked into that everybody was doing like their own social media investigations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And trying to like figure out who did it, and instead of now, it's not about that. I mean, if you unless you can figure out who did it, then there's a whole nother basis for a retrial. But
hey, do you guys know anything about like Holman questioning what's it, Fortson or whatever? Was he wearing like a body cam, or do they even have? Do he have body cams?
It was recorded.
Who's that?
Holman questioning Fortson before he unalived himself.
Did he wear a body
and they didn't bring him in anywhere, did they? He just questioned him at his house.
No, he questioned him at the Air Force Base.
At work, yeah, and it was not a body cam, but it was a recording device, because it's been mentioned that perhaps someone will request that audio to see exactly what was said. But I also wonder if the contempt stuff is part of this record, because technically it was like never supposed to be, but I guess because it was, that maybe it is. which was a whole nother like argument that should have been its own thing, because if not, now it's like in this record, which is
Now it
odd.
has to do with Richard Allen's case.
Yeah, it's weird.
Filed in a Richard Allen's case versus a case against Rosie and Baldwin, which never made sense, but I don't know how that affects anything legally going forward. I have no idea.
I don't know either.
That was just like a personal side question for something else, but yeah.
I also just want to float out there, and I don't think that this would be so. Generally, what you would do is, I know people have said previously about like asking the Innocence Project and like stuff like that, what it takes for them to be involved in whatnot. That would generally be after like you've done everything. So like habeas stuff, like after the direct appeal, after the habeas,
typically take
or not habeas.
Well, the first appeal is denied. You don't typically get an Innocence Project involved. But
until you
remember, like, but a couple weeks ago, we were talking about that there are individual local organizations and colleges that want and have what do you want to say, like have an interest in digging further into this for their own legal analysis.
Right.
If that makes sense, like their own legal research, because of all the fuckery that's happened.
Well, there's a lot to learn here,
right,
in my opinion. Stuff that they likely won't see in other cases. Very unique issues. Like Michael was saying, even the safekeeping fuckery on its own is like something that's difficult to find like other examples of, because generally like these are the rules, the judge knows the rules, and everybody follows the rules. And so it's not an argument that usually gets brought up. So it is a good learning opportunity, but also, any kind of like investigation that something like what Teresa just said were to dig up or flesh out or find out would then be able to be passed on for future stuff too. Like there's still a lot of avenues. It's just the time gap in between all of them. So Sterling, while I think that you're probably right about this direct appeal thing, I think probably any chance that it has on direct appeal would not so much be an argument for if the jury had known this or if the jury had not known that, and more likely to be something with regard to like structural errors, things that were done improperly, and are automatically reversible. But if not, there's still multiple other things, and those things can already be happening. If they are smart, they would already be happening.
I hope so. I think Teresa's right. I think both of y'all are right about one thing. I think that if there's evidence that someone else did it, that's the only chance he's got. Now, I'll admit that I'm no lawyer. I don't understand it. I'm just doing a prediction, okay? But based off of how this has worked, based off of everything else I've seen, unless you find out who actually did it and you have solid evidence of it.
You might be interested.
How many of these cases, like going by probability alone, like how many of these cases get appealed? Like how many of these go to a retrial,
Isn't it? It's probably like 2%. Like it's probably, it's literally nothing. But also you might be interested to know, and I'm glad you said that, because I also feel the same way, unfortunately, that the only way that this will matter in any way is if they are able to build a case, and solve the case, and be able to present that to somebody. And so my question for Michael one day, I forget when, was, let's say you, in your investigation, you do solve it. You come up with enough information to, let's go beyond probable cause, because I just think that that's so minuscule. But let's say that you could put forth a compelling trial against a person, okay? And I said to him, I was like, so wait, so if they do that and they provide all that information, like, does somebody else have to be arrested? So like, it just doesn't seem fair at this point that, let's say it's someone living in Carroll County, to present that information to Nicholas McClellan and expect him to charge somebody else for their murders. I think that's
whether that person gets charged or not. If you have, I think it's newly discovered exculpatory evidence, or that can be grounds for a retrial. But even what you consider to be new exculpatory evidence then goes to someone else to decide, or a group of people to decide. But any exculpatory evidence could be grounds for a retrial, as I understand it, or like someone said earlier, a Brady violation. If something like a structural error, like what you were saying, those two things would have to be. I don't know.
But I'm talking about dismissal. Like I'm talking about we've now got evidence, whatever that may be, that
Right.
so and so or several so and so's committed the crime, and here it all is.
Yeah.
For it to be dismissed, like for someone to determine that Richard Allen had nothing to do with it and be released, they would not have to. A prosecutor would not have to file charges against a person. So, for instance, let's say 5 years from now, someone who's currently alive is no longer alive, and they leave, a very detailed note with all the details, like everything that only the killer would know, and then like some other things that we don't even know. I'm just as an example. They
Newly
obviously can't be
discovered.
prosecuted.
That's newly discovered exculpatory evidence, right?
It would be.
Yeah.
I
Then
don't think that's going to happen.
that's what we need. Like I said, that's what we need.
I think a case would have to be built. It wouldn't have to be that definite, like to where someone's actually confessing. But it was of some comfort to me in the sense that you see these like the Innocence Projects where they end up exonerating these people. They never had anything to do with it, and it was really Jim Bob down the street, and they always had his DNA, but nobody ran it or whatever. That's usually the story. If Jim Bob is dead,
Good old Jim Bob.
yeah. Or Craig
Right.
Renfro,
Oh yeah.
might as well use a name of like someone that actually exists because apparently that makes sense. But if that were to happen, they wouldn't have to necessarily bring charges against a person in order to exonerate him. So let's say Nick McClelland gets all the information and evidence and says, "I'm sorry, I'm still not pressing charges on the." Somebody else can still decide that he's been exonerated, whether Nick brings charges or not. Is
Yeah.
kind of
In order to be heard for exoneration or whatever it is, to be exonerated, you have to meet certain criteria to even have that sort of like hearing or motion or whatever. And I think the only criteria is just very limited, and is newly discovered exculpatory or Brady evidence. I don't know what else there is because, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but that's what it would take. And so when I said earlier we'd have to find out who did it, maybe I was wrong. It would just have to be that or something that pointed to Richard Allen didn't do it that we didn't know at the time of the trial.
That's so difficult. Like, if you really think about, like, when people were saying, what was Richard Allen's alibi? And it's like, well, he got arrested like 7 years later. So
it's almost impossible.
Yeah, like, how are you supposed to go? I mean, I know that your phone tracks you everywhere you go, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to produce that data or get it, or even remember to get it. I don't even remember what phone I had 7 years ago.
How did they figure out the phone? Like, that was one thing that I thought was really weird, is they said like by release date they tracked like how many phones he should have had, and then like that one was missing. But like, what does that even mean by release date? Like, I don't know. I thought that was weird.
It was weird. It was like he was suggesting that every time a phone would be released,
that he would get that phone.
He would go buy it immediately.
Yeah, well, I think they were looking at like the pattern of how often he got a new phone, and then they're like, this phone is the one that's missing.
Yeah, but I think what was also not truthful about that whole comment was that we were including devices that weren't phones and also weren't his in what we collected from his house. So we might say we collected 15 devices from his house, and the only one he didn't have was the one he had at that time, but 10 of them were his wife's, 3 of them were his daughter's, and only 2 of them were his, and one was a pager.
Or something.
Yeah.
Thumb drives, and maybe the phones they did recover were either being used by the family or they were like worthless, up to no value.
Yeah,
and,
I thought some of that came from his interrogation when they asked him where the phone was.
He said, "Ask my wife."
Yeah, he said, "I don't know what happened with it," which makes
P.S. Like
Because his wife might have
everybody
recycled
got
it.
stuff wrong in their testimony. Like Kelsey got a ton of stuff wrong. Like every single person, every witness, like they all got stuff wrong. And that didn't mean that they were like the killers, and they were there at the same time too.
You know what was interesting
I don't think
about
Kelsey
Kelsey?
was a suspect.
Well,
I
what
mean-
stuck out. Go ahead.
No, I'm gonna stop there because I'm not going to go there.
I mean, you can
No,
not
well,
like her,
I'm
but
not
she's not. She's just not Bridge Guy. That's all I'm getting at.
Yeah, I
we
mean,
all
and I'm
know that.
yeah, and I'm not saying that she did anything, but something that stuck out to me, just as somebody that tracks all the things, was that she testified that she never went to work that day. And I'm like, I can think of no less than 5 instances where we were told that she went into work late at such and such a time. It was only there for an hour, and then she left work to go there because
so many stories.
Yeah, and I'm like, so how are we now like
Let's
that was the
talk
first
about the
time.
lack of investigation
I
into
know.
Kelsey.
Well,
Why
they
is
didn't-
Kelsey,
He addressed
why is
some of that
Kelsey
the other
not
night.
cleared? She's the last person to see the girls alive, and the cops don't even download her phone data.
That's bizarre to me. I mean,
What?
You know, you don't want to accuse them, okay? And Becky Patty even made a comment before in an interview that I watched where she said, you know, we were like, do whatever you have to clear us, and it's like they didn't even do that for you.
No,
like
there wouldn't even be the commentary if they had done all of those things. She comes forward and says that they took her DNA like 3 times, and that she interviewed for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, I you know, I think it was you, Teresa, that said when like all of the Frank's memo stuff came out, it's like, if those people are going to be mad at anybody, like you should be mad that the police allowed this to happen, because if they had just cleared you, you know, in a way that was satisfactory, which you should know.
Patrick Westphal stuff.
Yeah.
How easy would it be for them to have come forward during the 3-day hearings or anything along those lines and been like, here, look, here's the alibi for Johnny Messer. Here's here's the phone data for Brad Holder. Here's the video of whatever. You know, like, we cleared these people. We investigated them. There is nothing here, defense team. But it's like, they just kept arguing like, oh yeah, there's a conspiracy theory. And it's like, no, the issue is you guys didn't do the job you're paid to do.
You know what they didn't do? They didn't button shit up. Like, that's what, like, they didn't fucking like button their fucking shit up, and like they didn't get the heights. They didn't do anything like officially, and it's so annoying.
No, and you get search warrants for Elvis Fields' house.
Oh my God.
For all these guys' phones, and you just don't bother. Like, and then they keep going with this whole. This is what frustrates me. The only person we had probable cause for was Richard Allen, and it's like, no. You dipshit. You actually had probable cause to get search warrants for all of these other folk, and you never executed any of them.
Someone did all of your work. Someone did all of your work. The judge already found probable cause. Literally, all you had to do was physically go to the location and collect shit. That's all you had to do.
And then you could actually say, look, I did clear these people, and this is what I did to clear them. And we don't even need to talk about them because we know exactly where so-and-so was at 2:13 p.m. on this day.
And my opinion
part
still
of the
is,
problem, like Elvis, I think, would be if they interviewed him multiple times, like Holman said, they may have preemptively gotten the warrant based on the information that he said first, or whatever's spitting on them, and then went and talked to him and found out he's an idiot. And
well, they didn't. Murphy says he didn't call him back in, and that was that's what he was like crying about on the stand. Was one of his biggest regrets was not interviewing Elvis Fields again after the spit comment.
Yeah, please keep in mind that Holman, at no point where there was an opportunity to mention this whole explanation for the spit comment, it was never brought up until after the trial, when all of a sudden, which is information apparently only he has, is that they did talk to him, and that Elvis explained that the reason that he was making that comment about the spit was because he wondered if he spit on the ground and somebody scooped up the dirt and then brought it to the crime scene and put it there, if that was what he was thinking happened. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not buying that at all.
I wonder if that's in the discovery. Because like many things that the defense decided, they left
on the stand
with their narratives. They didn't go back and a lot of it. Remember the Miranda rights violation thing where they did
it's not their job to like do that.
the state would have said, this is what happened. I mean,
Well, Murphy was on the stand, and Nick does not cross-examine him and say, hey, wait a
we
minute.
did that.
What did Elvis actually say? Like, let's go over what Elvis actually said.
Or are you aware that Elvis said this? I mean, he didn't bring it up at all. Yeah. So, and to be honest, like I said before, when it comes to all of these people, I agree that they should have, like, if that's the case and they know where everybody's location was and they feel confident that whatever investigation they did into these people's alibis was thorough and effectively ruled them out as having anything to do with this, I personally wouldn't have bothered to do that in the pretrial phase. I would have waited till we were in front of a jury and I'd have made the defense look dumb. I would have said, look at what they're trying to do. They're trying to blame all these other people. They don't have an alibi for Richard Allen, but here, we're going to show you video of so-and-so at the gym or whatever the case may be, and then do it there and be done with it.
But look at what they did for Keegan Kline. I mean, as much as they actually thought Keegan Kline was actually part of the whole thing, how much money they spent on the investigation into him when they already knew that he was a liar and they already knew they could charge him for other crimes. And they spent a ton of time, manpower, hours, investigative tools, researching what this guy said, who they knew was a liar, and they still did it. And I'm all for it. Perfect. For me, you clear Keegan Kline and Tony Kline. I think they did enough to show, like, this is his confession. We go and we sweep the Wabash River. We go to grandma's house. We go and do these things. We look at the red truck. We look at the phone data, and we say, no, your phones are at home too. Da 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 da. And they put all this stuff together, and they spend tons of money on it. But then it's like they have no problem telling us what they did to clear him. But then you have all these other people. And it's like, we cleared him. Just trust. We cleared him. That's what we did. We cleared him. And that's all. That's all. The only person who was probable cause for was Richard Allen. Yeah. And like, that's the end of it. And it's like, you could easily say, this is everything we did to clear Brad Holder. This is everything we did to clear Patrick Westfall. This is everything we did to clear Ron Logan.
And we know the things that they
I
didn't
thought that
do.
they had
like
done that.
we know that they didn't collect the camera from the storage units across the street or whatever. They didn't interview witnesses till 6 months later. They didn't. We know what they didn't do. So like,
was
that's
not
what
one of
me
them
off.
at a hospital in Muncie or something, or both?
No, but the police found out that was a lie.
It was a lie. Yeah.
They found out it was a lie. The last thing that they, the last comment or whatever that they were able to track with regard to specifically Elvis Fields was that he had gotten an attorney. I forget her name. It was a female. And she called Detective so-and-so. And this detective said that they needed Elvis to take a polygraph. And the attorney obviously said, absolutely not. And this detective said that if he didn't take a polygraph, then they were never going to be able to rule him out as a suspect or a witness to the murders. And they hung up on that note. And
but then the attorney would know. The thing is, I offered to give him a polygraph, and he said no. And if you didn't do anything, wouldn't you just take the polygraph?
Exactly. And as far as that attorney went, she probably just assumed he was forever going to be they were either going to come charge him or they weren't. But she was obviously fine with him being a witness or suspect, and we would just handle it whichever way it went. But as soon as they hung up the phone, they made a note that there was no further follow-up required. So that's how he was cleared. They said that he couldn't be cleared if he didn't take the polygraph. They were told no again, and they cleared him. And to be honest, they can say they cleared all these people, and because the file or whatever says cleared, then that means that they were cleared, and we should just take their word. But like, Richard Allen's also said it was cleared.
Also, that tip, like being number 74 and being in the database, right? That means it had to have been in the database. Like,
can't go here.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. No, because this tip bothers me so much.
We need Kathy. 74. Bring Kathy.
What's 74?
We need to know how it got out of order, who put it in there, what she was doing. I need Kathy's filing cabinets. And I said to Michael the other day, in that motion for specific evidence to be preserved, how the fuck are those 5+ filing cabinets not on that list? That would be my number one. I need to compare what she's got in that filing cabinet that she's guarding with her life, that she thinks is her property, and I need to compare that to Orion and see what other information is in there.
And see, like, if it says cleared, was it handwritten? Is this like a stamp?
She
Is
said
this like
she said it was in green.
Stamped and then put in a file that has a little green sticker on the file for all of the cleared tips.
so then
twice.
there's multiple tips in there that say cleared, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
But we also have, this is my issue with this, because we know what this whole misfiled, lost, and then Nick comes out with the whole new narrative that none of it's true. It was just put in the cleared stuff. The number 74 in the Orion system, you can't go back and edit the number. So we know that Richard Allen's tip was not misfiled. It was not lost. It was not just misfiled into a cleared thing or accidentally stamped. Whoever put it into the Orion system under tip number 74, somebody
put
had
it
to
in after tip
go in
73.
And
Yeah,
the
it's written
Orion
after
system
73
is
and before 75, and you have
is
to physically
designed-
go in there and put how you're following up on it and whether you're done with that follow-up. There's like, I don't remember exactly what they are, but there's certain.
Yeah,
like,
because you didn't let me
certain
finish
lines.
my explanation after you
It's-
started the tip.
Sorry,
it's
see, I
designed
thought
to
that
make
was-
connections, though, right?
the
Isn't that like how the
74
whole
thing gets me
system's
pissed
made?
off.
Where are you,
Can we-
Kathy?
I'll say, can we also agree that none of us know? And
Oh,
everything
All
that
Eyes
we're
knows. I know
getting
for a
at-
fact All
No,
Eyes
she
knows
has
all
no
this
idea
stuff.
what
She-
happened with that tip in reality.
She knows more
None of
than
us
anybody
do.
else
Well, that's
does, I
the
bet.
problem, though. Dan,
Nobody knows.
people testify.
I know. I'm
People
just saying,
testify
like,
and
for the
and they're telling different stories during their testimony, and then you have post-trial interviews being done by the lead prosecutor in the case, telling a third, fourth, fifth story on what happened with this tip.
Contradicting his
saying is-
witness testimony.
Right. This system is set up where all the tips are entered and then they're put in, and you have to log into the system to be able to do anything with those tips. So
yeah,
then
that's
he's
what we
coming out and saying,
discussed
like,
earlier. Who marked it as cleared? Who put it in
who
there?
marked
Why
it?
is
And he's like, oh, we don't know.
Nobody
who did it.
knows.
You have to know
Yeah.
because it's in the Orion system.
Yeah,
But
somebody
my
knows.
Somebody knows.
my explanation for that was that so Kathy Shank had no authority to be clearing people. Do we all agree on that?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. So in following that thought process, then there should be no tips that just have Kathy Shank's name on them saying that they can be discontinued and that they're cleared. Okay, right?
Correct.
But there is. So the question becomes, if Kathy is going in,
Unless you say that she's marking that they have the word cleared on them, she's not actually clearing the tip.
no,
Oh,
she's
I don't know
going
what that
in.
actually means.
Like
So
data
same-
entry type.
So same thing for the Richard, same thing for the this recent Ron Logan thing. Okay. She wrote in January of 2023 in Orion that because no one followed up on the tip and that shut up, and that Ron Logan was dead, it could be discontinued. And then that's it. It's closed out. It's no longer okay. So Kathy doesn't have the authority to do that. So
But she does
either
because somebody gave her a login that lists her in the Orion system as an investigator.
right. So it was either her taking it upon herself to do it, or let's say she was entering it for somebody else. So let's say she was entering it on, say Jerry Holman went to Kathy Shank and said, hey, do go in there and write that Ron Logan died and nobody followed up. You know, let's say that he said to Kathy to do that. Well, then Kathy goes in, she's logged in under her name, and she writes, this could be discontinued because nobody followed up with it and Ron Logan died. Well, when the question then becomes, whose decision was this? If there's no notation of that,
Why
what
do
are
we
the
have
odds
this? Why do we have this data, but we don't have? No, I like we're saying we have Cassie's logins. Why do we have that? Not who filed the tip.
Exactly, Dan. That's exactly the point.
No, I
But
mean, where does
I
that
need
come
to
from?
hear-
Where does
I
that
need-
come from?
I need to
the
hear
exhibit that was just filed.
accidental tip
Okay,
jokes.
okay.
I need to hear these
We
accidental
did that
tip
earlier.
jokes. What, when I was gone?
No, well, yeah,
Accidental
then
what?
too, but the other day,
Accidental
tip.
tip
everybody.
jokes?
Yes.
This is why we try to stay away from this discussion.
We even had some anal jokes in there.
Yes, I love it.
It's Dan's fault. Don't blame
You
us.
have to.
It's all
No,
Dan.
you have to have the anal in there. You know, if you're gonna have,
Always.
if you're gonna be talking about it, you gotta
Spit
get
on that
in
thing,
there.
Hawk Tua.
It's Cam gets it.
Fuck.
Yeah, no, I this whole tip narrative just really I'm like, if you can't even figure this shit out, like, what else did you guys do?
They can't investigate. Obviously, they are not good investigators.
My issue is we might not know, right? We might not know who entered the tip, and we might not know who cleared it, but Nick McClelland should know. So for him to be doing an interview saying he literally said it wasn't misfiled, which contradicts what Kathy said. It wasn't filed with his street name as the last name, which also contradicts what Kathy said in her sworn testimony. We basically just didn't pay any attention to it because it was cleared, but we have no clue who cleared him. Somebody marked it as cleared. Well, sir, you should know exactly who said it, because just like in the electronic medical records that I work in all the time, one of the biggest things that they say is, and you can get fired for this. You cannot go into a patient's chart that you are not treating. And the reason for that, so if I'm at my computer and someone else is logged in, I can't be logging shit in their chart under Dan's name.
No, because you're saying that I did it. Legally.
Correct. So if it becomes a legal issue down the road, they're going to be coming to Dan saying, you documented all this stuff about this patient, and you're going to be like, I don't remember this, but if it says I did this 8 years ago, then I must have, because my name is on there. And so with this tip thing, everybody has their own login for a purpose, and that's to know who did what. So I don't think that Kathy Shank should have ever been entering anything on behalf of anyone else, because after 7 years, and she's old, what are the fucking odds 70,000 tips later that she's going to know exactly which law enforcement officer who did have that authority told her to put that in there?
Plus, if she was entering it in, why would she then come across it again and say like, "Oh, it's"? And why is she like opening and reading every single one that she comes?
Why is she creating filing cabinets and also scanning in and also typing in and making more filing cabinets?
I thought Doug Carter said it was because they started from the beginning and they looked at everything from the beginning over again, and that's when she found it. And she's a hero.
They started doing that back in May of 2017, I think was the first interview I found that Doug Carter says, we're going to go back to the beginning. We'll just start again.
Do you guys think she'll get the reward? Do you guys think she'll get the reward money?
No, she turned it down already.
She said to send it to the park, the ballpark.
I think if she actually found it,
did they send it? Did they send it to the park?
She can't. I don't.
They're never gonna give her the tip, and they're gonna pocket that.
They're never gonna give her the tip, Dan.
Let's be so for real. They're like, we got to have Kathy be the one to do it, because that tip or that reward money is plumb gone. It's been gone. That's why we were asking for $4 million. We let this lady. They let her work for free.
It's the most embarrassing part of the whole investigation is that tip.
Kathy Shank worked for free for 8 years. Nick McClelland, over the course of 2 years, requested $4.5 million, and nobody made any type of effort to pay Kathy Shank for the 8 years she worked for free. But yet, I guess they think that
But she's labeled as an investigator in the system.
She's labeled as a hero. The S, remember, it doesn't stand for Shank; it stands for Superman.
She's the only woman on stage at the arrest press conference too. Which I was like, who is that woman on stage? Like, there's no other women out there.
She's a leprechaun. She was like, you could just barely see the tip of her hair.
The tip?
Behind McClelland.
I'm about to tip over in my chair.
If she was tasked with going back through the file from the beginning, I mean, kind of, you are an investigator. It might not be official, but it sounds like that's what she was doing.
But she said she wasn't reading anything.
Couldn't read anything.
She said she specifically. She said she was specifically. Yeah, she said she was specifically at one point asked not to read anything. But yet then she also testified that she would frequently, and I think Liggett also said this, that she would frequently bring them tips that she found and say, did you know about this? Did you know about this?
We knew all of those people. We knew all of those names. All those names were familiar to us.
We only didn't know Richard Allen. The tip in a box in a drawer.
It's my tip in a box.
Tip in her box. Tip in her box. Oh shit! I think it's getting too late.
Yeah, it is.
It's party, so they
12:30 here
for anybody because they couldn't.
Oh my goodness! I'm sorry.
No.
I know. Sleuthie's told me, she's like, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to stay on there for. And then like 4 hours
I know,
later.
and then we do this. This is just how I do actually have to go. I have to get my little one to sleep. He was supposed to already be asleep when he's not. So, but I could just hang out with you guys all night.
I know,
Yeah,
mine is
totally.
too, but I do have to go to sleep because I'm still very, very hopeful that he will return to school tomorrow.
Okay.
Good
Well,
luck with
thank
that.
you so much for coming on. Like, I really enjoyed this show, even though I was like out of it for like a little bit. But you guys are all great. I appreciate every single one of you. And I
hanging
do,
in there.
I do simp for DB. Okay, so what?
It's okay.
That's okay. I have to simp for Dan all the time.
Ladies
No,
love
it was
cool
fun.
DB.
It was fun, Fishy. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
if
all
I'm
of you.
being totally honest, I mean, I guess we all like simp for somebody because I think everybody knows that I've been, not for nothing, I've been trying to get a hold of Sterling. I'm like, does anybody know how to get a hold of Sterling? No. I'm like, the only place I ever see him is like Greeno's channel. Like, who is he? Is he on Twitter? Like, is he one of these YouTube people? And I don't know whatever his YouTube name is.
He's
And so
super cool. I had to like get him to create a Twitter just to talk to me, like, because he commented on one of my videos, and I was like, dude, I was like waiting to pounce on him. Not in a weird way, but like,
So it's funny though, because when I told everybody that we were going to come over here after the chat, I was like, yeah, I'm like, Sleuthie's going on Don't Hate Create, so we're going to head over there. I'm like, and Sterling's going to be on there, and the whole chat's like, oh my God, Sterling's going to be there. Sterling's going to be there. I was like,
they love for they love for me to say dumb shit, and
No.
I mean, and you know, I like to think of myself kind of like what y'all described as the Supreme Court and what they did, and they ask questions not because they believe that certain thing, and sometimes I just want to hear the other side of it and the argument and push back. So thank y'all for letting me do that. Y'all have a good night.
Dude, we love you.
Thank you guys. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for letting me come up.
I'm going to go too, so I don't keep talking.
Okay.
Bye, Sleuthie.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. And Paradox, are you even on here? He's just sitting
fucking
there.
sleeping.
Bye. And I guess we all should go. Or let
Yes, go
Dan
to
take
bed.
it over forever.
No, no.
Okay, good night,
I'll be
everyone.
getting on the
Thank you.
sewer slide.
And I'm going to end the stream before I exit. That's what I'm going to do. Good night.
There you go.